waiting
You
for
got
the
your shirt
TV
right
guy.
out. You ready?
All set?
We good?
We're live.
We break the screen yet?
Okay, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. We'll bring the Board of Selectmen out of recess. We had a meeting earlier. So there's no need for a roll call. Mr. Newman? You go ahead of everything tonight. Mr. Newman was here 2 weeks ago and had some unfinished business, and we'd like to allow him to finish his business now. Derek?
Thanks, Derek.
I'd like to call up Dean Dickers.
Jim, is the light on, Bill?
Yeah, it's on. Officer Dean Dickers. Officer Dean Dickers is to pick out some of these certificates that I have for the police
Okay.
fire squad. First of all, I'll give you yours, Dean.
Thank you very much.
And I believe Stephen Kearney is with you. And I know Mr. Roberto, I know he is. We have one here for Richard Stanley.
Huh?
I just want to thank the chief and the fireman squad for being with us on Memorial Day with all our ceremonies.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. That's all I have, Steve. Thank you.
Thank you, Jim. Announcements.
Mr. Chair, just a couple of announcements tonight. Have to pull them up. We have Wareham Free Library's new story walk to the garden opens Saturday, July 14th, 9:30 to 2 p.m. Read 10 Hungry Rabbits, a picture book by Anita Lobel, while walking from page to page and enjoying the fresh air. Try out this free family activity on Saturday, July 14th, and you can visit the Friends of the Wareham Free Library annual book sale, farmers market, and yard sale the same day from 9:30 to 1:30 p.m. The Story Walk project was created by Ann Ferguson of Montpelier, Vermont, and developed in collaboration with the Vermont Bicycle and Pedestrian Coalition and the Kellogg Hubbard Library. The Story Walk and Community Garden at the library is funded by the Wareham Library Foundation. Next, we have on June 16th, Christopher Alissier was tragically killed in a car crash on Route 495 on his way to work at the Taunton State Hospital, where he was employed for 22 years. Chris was 43 years old. He leaves behind his wife, Kathy, his two sons, Jordan, 15, and Ryan, 6. Chris also took care of his mother-in-law, Patricia Cullen, who is paralyzed. Please consider donating to this family during this difficult time. Any size donation will help this family. Thank you. The donations end on July 31st, 2012. You need to go to www.youcaring.com, and it's a benefit the family of Christopher Alissier. One more, just let me find it. I should probably put these in order before I get here. I might have, it was a library announcement. I might have deleted it by accident. Oh, okay. All right, Mr. Teitelbaum, you want to go ahead?
Yes, the Friends of the Wareham Free Library also want to remind everyone of the grand opening ceremony for the Spinney Memorial Library branch. That's on Monday, July 23rd at 11:30 a.m. And at noon, Onset's renowned children's entertainer Jackson Gilman will present a family program of comedy and songs on the library's back patio deck. Everyone is invited to attend.
Thank you. Mr. Slavin, any announcements?
I have an announcement from the American Legion. The 34th annual flea market sponsored by the Wareham American Legion Post 220 will be on August 11th from 9 a.m. to 3 p.m. at Post Quarters on the corner of 777 Main Street and Toby Roads. Activities are both inside and outside, rain or shine. Food is available. Table space may be obtained for $15. Bring your own table. Call Joe 508-995-4481 or Jim 508-295-4790. That's for you. Thank you.
Mr. Holmes?
Nope.
Mrs. Begley?
Citizens' participation? Bill?
Thank you. My name is Bill Whitehouse, Gibbs Avenue. The town is in non-compliance with a public information request that I filed not too long ago, and I'm hoping I get a response soon. The clock ran out on Sunday. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you.
In response, Mr. Whitehouse, I will say that that information is in the process of being gathered. I think we are with the holiday and everything, people being off. It's just been a little slow, but you'll get your information. You're welcome. Next, ma'am.
Either one.
I'm Dorothy Heath from District 2. 20 months ago at the town meeting, we voted to have a sewer commission. And Mr. Chairman, I'd like to know if you or any of the other selectmen know where this stands right now. Have you been working on seeing this come to fruition? And if not, has one of you stepped up to be expediter, or have you appointed an expediter so this can get moving? I know as selectmen you have a lot of things on your plate and you're doing an awful lot of work on sewer right now. I think it would behoove you and the rest of the town to get this accomplished so that then you will have the time that you are spending on the sewer commission to work on budgeting, finance, infrastructure, and all the other things that are your purview.
I agree with you 100%. Is there anyone who has any information, Mr. Bowen? I think the last thing I saw came from you in terms of some language. I'll ask Mr. Bowen. I don't want to put him on the spot, but I'll ask him to comment if he could.
So I'm used to being on the spot, Mr. Chair. I know the last dealings I had with it were probably back in, I want to say February, where there was a question with the Senate Council, and they were concerned about a conflict with some, I want to say 1940 legislation, and I made a simple language suggestion which seemed to please them, and with that approval from Senate Council, I've heard no more about it ever since then. So I don't think that there are any language difficulties at this point.
Mr. Chairman, have there been any inquiries as to what's happening since February?
I haven't.
Well, is there somebody appointed to make inquiries on this?
No, but we can certainly do that.
Well, will be 2 years in October.
Right. I'm not going to comment on it because the last time I did, I made a mistake and I caught heck for it the next day. So
Okay, I'm just saying that, I mean, there's
I
so
can't give
much
you a
work to be done.
I
And
agree
I know
with you.
you're spending your Saturday having a workshop on the
Right.
sewer and everything else, that if we had somebody else, another group of people doing this, think about all the time you'd have to devote to other things.
I agree
Even a
with
golf
you.
game here and there.
You got that right. I think Mrs. Heath makes a great suggestion. Are you raising your hand as a volunteer, Mr. Slavin?
I have no problem with it. I think we should put it on the next agenda and put a game plan together. It's been too long.
Thank you.
It's our
Thank you.
It's our
Does
responsibility.
the board have any issues with Mr. Slavin and expedite this along for the board? No? Congratulations.
Thank you, maybe.
Next. Ma'am? Mrs. Slavin.
Good evening, Sandy Slavin. 3 things, and I'll make it quick. 1, I want to thank everybody that came out and supported the Wareham garden tours. We had a great 2 days, and I think everybody enjoyed the 6 gardens. 2, I want to thank everybody that came out and supported the Wareham Historical Society Antique Fair along with the Swan Festival. Other than a little rain in the morning, I think the afternoon cleared up and went well. Number 3, I had the privilege of riding in the cars on July 4th to bring a soldier home to his family. And as I said in the car with Alan, I said, how many other families have their members in the service overseas? Twice a month, I have this newsletter called The Coyote from Sandy Valley, Nevada. The first page of this little newsletter lists everybody in the valley that's in the service. I can't find that any place in town. I think it would be great if someone could compile a list of the mothers and fathers, brothers and sisters, daughters and sons that are serving overseas, that are residents in Wareham, so that we can see who is in serving us, supporting us. Just a recommendation that we should make it public who's out there and to support them and their families. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr.
Yeah,
Chair.
it was a, I know some of us were able to be there. It was a, we were driving through Main Street, and I know that when we saw those kids with the salute, and I know Dolores and I were in the car crying, I have since contacted Marie from a Heroes Welcome, and I'll make a pitch in public. I probably shouldn't do this, but Dolores and I are going to go ahead and volunteer to begin a Wareham chapter of Heroes Welcome. I see Jim is here. I was going to call Jim. He was my next call this week, so it's part of our veteran services. But I got to tell you, it was amazing. Mrs. Begley was there. Alan was there. Mrs. Winslow was out of town. Peter was out of town. Susan Gifford was tied up. It was just so special to see that young man come home and be greeted by his son, who he hadn't seen since he was born 6 months ago, and to have a hero, and they truly are heroes, to come home. This kid was in one piece. He was healthy. He didn't look damaged. You see so many soldiers come home and their legs are blown off and they're damaged physically and mentally. So it was a real honor to do that. I just wish we had more time. And by having a local chapter, they have ties to the military and everything, so then we can advertise to our residents that if you have somebody coming home, it's all secret. It's all a secret until they get off the highway and see that police car. Only the sister knew and the mother knew. The guy didn't know. That's why he didn't see anything on Facebook. He couldn't put it on Facebook because he would see it. So he thought he was being stalked by the police. Did you see his comments?
I did.
Yeah.
But, Mr. Chair, just to also to acknowledge the people that were involved, because this was only like 48 hours' notice from the people from A Hero's
absolutely.
Welcome. But Claire and Howard Smith were there with their fire truck. The Wareham Fire Department was there with a fire truck. The harbor master and all of his vehicles were there. The police department was represented, and it was going through town with all the sirens and lights going.
EMS.
And EMS was there with their vehicles, and it was very, very moving. As we went through the intersections that were blocked off, that the police officers were standing there at attention saluting this young man. It was an incredible experience.
And we had the sign, one of our new signs that were funded by CETA on Main Street with his name on it. Welcome home, private. I see Mrs. Connaughton here. We moved the sign. It was only for a couple of hours, Gene. It was only for a couple of hours, but we moved the sign so that he could see that when he was driving down the street. It's just too bad that he didn't come home 3 hours earlier, because the Swan Festival was in full swing, and that would have been really something to come down there with, Wareham full in the downtown area.
But the vehicles that gave way to the emergency, all the lights and the sirens, everyone was honking their horns as
Yeah,
he went by.
it's pretty
And
cool.
he was pretty overwhelmed. He was pretty speechless when he got out of the car.
He thought he was being arrested. Mrs. Winslow?
Well, Mr. Chair, I just want to say I think a local chapter would be a good idea. Last summer...
I'm not doing that as a town official.
No, I
It's
understand
a
that, but
private-
last summer the board put out several times through the meeting and the media that there was a large contingency of soldiers that came home and we wanted to honor them, but unfortunately and I talked to Jim about it, it's very difficult to get their names if they don't come forward. Sometimes they don't want, that type of attention. So I think with a local chapter working closely with our veterans people, we'll have the opportunity more often. Because
Yes, it was really pretty cool. And then when I called the woman to let her know that we got the package home, right? She was in Philadelphia welcoming another one, and they had a huge accident because Dolores had just said, oh, we could have called motorcycle groups, and because the motorcycle guys all go out for the veterans, right? And they had a large contingent of motorcycles in Philadelphia, and they had an accident. And you know what happens when one motorcycle goes down? A bunch of them go down. And it was right in the middle of all this, and they had multiple injuries, and they had to bring ambulances in. But anyway, so that's pretty cool stuff. All right, next, sir.
Good evening, Dave Willis, Onset, Mass. And I'm here again for the same reason. But this time I'm really ashamed, disgraced, and embarrassed as a Wareham resident at our inability to enforce litter and collect trash in a timely fashion. Over a year ago, I came to you. I showed you a presentation on this chronic problem that is plaguing this town. I need to know how we can move this forward. I'm asking you to place it on the agenda. I've already went to the Selectmen's office and filled out an application to be placed on the agenda. Shirley told me tentatively the 24th. I'm waiting to hear back.
Well, we're going to be discussing tonight the formation of a trash committee, task force, whatever, later on in our agenda under town business.
Okay. If I could just continue for a moment.
Well, I'm just addressing your agenda issue because
okay.
at that point, if the board so chooses to do that, you would be giving your presentation to that group.
Okay.
Well, maybe you'd be part of that group if you choose.
Thank you. I appreciate that, because if you received my emails with the photos of Monday morning, it was embarrassing. And it's got to begin with enforcement. And I'd like to ask Chief Stanley to back me up on this. People that come to this town, I'd like to use an analogy. It's like when you have a baby. The baby goes to the bathroom in a diaper. And that's like the people that come to this town. They use the diaper. And all we do as a town and municipal maintenance is continue to change that diaper. We are not teaching the visitors to use the potty, to use the trash barrel. That's part of the problem. The other problem is we need to reform collection times. It has to be in the evening, the day of. There is no reason why residents that rise early should be embarrassed and disgraced by the trash that sits waiting for us. We're part of this community as well. People that get up at 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock to go to the office and drive through town that's already clean. So you don't see what we see. And you're not realizing what's happening with the birds and the skunks and potentially, eventually, the coyotes will come. Okay, so the committee really needs to be formed, because what's been going on since I've been involved in this is a lot of knee-jerk reactions, a lot of throwing money at things, $8,000 at 20 barrels, when we still don't have the ability to empty the barrel. I don't care how many new barrels you buy. They have to be emptied in a timely fashion. When you go to Disney World, there's a barrel every so many feet. And they have people collecting trash constantly. Why? Because they invite people to Disney World. They're not going to leave it till the next day. We invite people to our beaches. It should be cleaned that day. And then when you get events like July 4th, let's use some of these beat cops and police to get on the beach and enforce littering. Because if you saw the beach Monday morning or Sunday night, absolute disgrace. Okay?
Well, we're going to be, like I say, it's on our agenda for this evening for the board to have a discussion about it. Mrs. Begley?
Mr. Chair, I just wanted to address Monday morning. I happened to drive by Onset Center and saw quite a bit of trash that was stacked up around the trash barrels. But I also saw Frank Bergamasco and his crew out there with the sticks to pick up the litter. And they, in fact, were the ones that were putting it around the trash barrels, so then when they went back and got the truck, then they came around and picked up all the trash. So when I went by at 6:45, they were already hard at work. And when I came back through town at 10 or 10:30 in the morning, it was all immaculate. So the thing is about doing it on Sunday night after the fireworks, I think that's an unreasonable request to make of municipal maintenance, in my personal opinion.
I disagree.
And having
Well,
the
I don't want to I don't want to.
having the fireworks that late, they were there very early in the morning and had already been hard at work for some time.
Yeah.
We weren't paying double time, we were paying straight time on Monday.
I'd like to respond to that, Steve, if I could.
Well, it's not a debate and citizens' participation.
Right,
so-
but I wasn't through talking.
Well, you need to wrap it up then, David, because we got to move on. It's an agenda item tonight, and I can't be discussing agenda items prior to the agenda. So go ahead.
Just to respond to that, Ms. Begley, they have a Caribbean festival in Dorchester, which actually has a lot more people in it than Onset Wareham does, and they have it every year. And at the end of the festival, the police come in on horseback and the beat cops and so forth, and they push the people out, because probably upwards of 100, 200,000 people come to this festival. The end of the festival is a contingency plan. Move the people out, and right behind them is street sweepers and municipal maintenance, and they sweep the streets and they empty the barrel because they cannot afford to leave it to the next day. So it can be done, and it is done all over the state, and it needs to be changed.
And Mr. Gifford is open to suggestions. So, done?
For today.
Thank you. Anyone else? I thought I saw another hand. Yes, ma'am? I'm sorry, sir. I think I missed you. You can just walk down and sit here in this chair and wait. Good evening.
Hi, Sharon
Hi.
Gomes, Oakdale Betterment. I was wondering if you are close to getting the answers.
I
and-
saw an email. I just got back myself this afternoon from North Carolina. I saw an email. I know he's hiding in the room somewhere. He was typing. He's an awful typist, but my understanding is we'll have those run by Rich by tomorrow. Is that correct? Yes.
So how would they get in touch with me, or am I going to get a phone call, or?
There'll be a phone call to you, and we will. And I think we're posting those as well, right? Yeah. If you give Guy, make sure he has. He knows your email address, right?
Okay.
Okay. You have it. Would you
Phone
give me your email address?
Okay.
Yeah, we get that out.
Okay. I have another question. Do
Sure.
we have an engineer in the town, for the town of Wareham?
An employee?
Someone that has engineer background, education in engineering, or engineer itself for the town of Wareham?
As an employee?
As
or
an
a
employee.
contractor? Do we have an employee? I don't believe we have any employees.
No, they're all contracted.
Okay. I want to thank the lady that was here too earlier, because I think that we do need sewer commissioners just in that area itself, because so many mistakes have been made, and we don't want the town to pay for any more mistakes.
Yeah.
So thank you, and there's no insult to anyone.
Now, Mr. Slavin
It's
is going
just-
to expedite that for us.
Okay. Thank you.
Sir, I apologize. I went right over to that side of the room.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Dan Davis. I've sent you folks an email recently with regard to, you're nodding, good.
3 issues, right?
Well, there's actually 4, but I'll get to that one in a minute. Could you give me a status, because you may or may not be aware of the fact that this has been going on since 2010, these 3 issues.
And why don't you just highlight the issues for the
Okay.
for the board?
Speed limit in front of my residence, 14 Tremont Road, which is a very small stretch of road between Route 28 and Main Street.
Right.
The speed limit there is legally,
And let's just stop there. Speed limit is the road commissioner.
Road commissioners.
Yeah, I was preparing. I just got back. I was preparing an email for you. The speed limit would be addressed by the road commissioners, who the chairperson is Mr. Charbonneau.
Well,
I'm going to put this in an email to you, so.
okay. Secondly is, I received a letter from a Mr. Mark Andrews back in 2010 with regard to the drainage in front of my residence. When it rains to any extent, the water diverts down my driveway and floods out my garage. And I've had to resort to, because of the, well, I got a promise and then nothing happened, I've had to resort to putting up a earthen berm to prevent water from going down the driveway. Also, with Mr. Andrews, I believe, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to ask you, did he tell you to put the berm up?
No.
Oh, he didn't.
No,
He
I
did it
just
so
got
you'd
tired
save
of the
your-
water,
right.
so I had to do something, so.
Right.
The third item was, I refer to it as a minor subdivision. I also own the property at 609 Main Street. The two properties back to back. And I'd like to take land from 609 and add it to 14 Tremont. And Mr. Andrews was going to get back to me with regard to an issue with a fire hydrant. There's a fire hydrant right where I want to put this stub out, if you will, onto Main Street from the 14 Tremont property. He was going to talk to the water people and get back to me. Haven't heard anything. So, am I making any sense, or?
Yeah, he did. Yeah. I'm sorry?
Wouldn't that be like a transfer of property rights or development? Wouldn't?
No.
Well, as I indicated in my email,
He owns both pieces of property.
I understand that, but he wants to transfer a piece to another piece. That would
Right.
technically be a TDR, right?
It's planning board.
It's what?
It'd be the planning board.
No, I understand that, but if what we're talking about is a TDR, we don't have. No, that's not
Yeah,
what he's saying.
Are these just letters from Mr. Andrews, or did you actually go to the planning board?
no, I haven't been. I haven't been simply because there was the issue with the fire hydrant, and there was the issue with the intersection of Main Street and Tremont Road being real close. And I want to make sure that I don't spend a lot of money for a surveyor and then have somebody tell me,
Right.
hey, you can't do it because of the fire hydrant or because of the intersection.
I believe Mr. Bowen may have something he can give you a little bit of guidance on as to the fire hydrant in particular.
Okay.
Okay, listen, what we don't want to do, I asked the gentleman to go through each of the, and we need to prepare a response for him. I don't want to debate or discuss because they're not on the agenda. So go ahead. Number 4.
The last one is, who do I talk to with regard to the fact, my property is zoned commercial, and I like to talk to whoever the appropriate party is to have a gift shop and or a little antique store or something like that. Who would that be that I would actually talk to within the town and get the rules and regulations for?
The first step is typically I recommend people go see Mr. Burke at the inspectional services.
Inspectional service.
Inspectional services,
Okay.
right?
Okay.
And he can give you the law on, what's required of the building, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
Okay.
If you're going to put a store in, or if you're going to.
It was a restaurant at one time. I don't know if
Right.
you're familiar with the building, but it was a restaurant at one time.
And we usually start there with Miles. If you're going to do food and things like that, then
No,
he would get the Board of Health involved, and and you guys.
I've
can-
got, my idea is a little antique shop, maybe, that's about it. So,
And I would go to Miles on that. And
okay.
He's
Burke,
done.
Mr. Burke.
I'm sorry.
Mr. Burke?
Mr. Burke, Miles
okay.
Burke.
Okay.
And he's helped a lot of business guys out like that. He'll come out with you and pay you a visit and go through the building and then kind of tell you what needs to fall out there. And then
Okay.
he can tell you if you're going to need to go to zoning or some other department in town to get permits, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
Okay.
Yes?
Just as regards the fire hydrant, that is controlled by the Wareham Fire and Water District,
Right.
which is a separate governmental body and has absolutely nothing to do with the Wareham municipal government, which is what I guess we are. So you would need to go to the fire and water people and talk to them about the fire hydrant because that's not our purview.
Yeah, it's, with all due respect, it's been kind of like the police department and everybody else. Everybody seems to do this for me, and I don't, well, you know, quite honestly, I don't get straight answers. And this is why I've been dealing with this for 2 years now.
Yeah. And like I say, I'm preparing a response for some of this. I'll sit with Mr. Foster, and we will get a response back to you ASAP as to who to call, phone numbers, et cetera.
Are you, by the way, are you looking for an engineer to participate on some of your boards?
I'm sorry?
I found it kind of humorous that this lady that was here a moment ago was asking about having an engineer on staff. I happen to be an engineer.
Oh, she was referring to the sewer projects.
Yeah. That's it. If you could get back to me and let me know what's going on, I'd appreciate it.
Yes, sir.
By the way,
we will
did
do
you
that.
notice that I did mention to you that in the handbook for the driver's ed for the state of Massachusetts, it very clearly states what the speed limit should be in front of my house? Okay.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
Have a great night. Anyone else?
Mr. Chair, that would bring us up to the Westfield discussion. I'm not sure if there is a discussion. It's been put out to bid, correct?
That's correct.
So we now await.
Our timeline.
Okay. Consent agenda. Authorization to sign bills and documents, etc. We do have some bills here. We have an invoice from Blattman, Brabowski and Mead LLC, attorneys at law, dated June 20th, 2012. Invoice number 7828 in the amount of $15,000. I move to approve and pay.
Have a motion made. Second by Mrs. Begley on the question. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Abstained? 500.
We also have an invoice from Huggins and Witten LLC, attorneys at law. This invoice is dated 9/13/2011, and the invoice number is Wareham BOS in the amount of $3,112.50.
That is not covered under the consent agenda. We can bring that up under any other. It's not on the agenda. Anything anticipated within 48 hours.
There's a note on this telling me that it falls under the.
Town business.
Okay, well, then we'll hold off on those.
Right.
We have an appointment of election poll workers. In a memo dated June 26th, please appoint the following poll workers for the year, term to expire on June 30th, 2013. I move to appoint Jack Silva as the warden to an election poll worker appointment for a term to expire no later than June 30th, 2013.
I have a motion made and second by Mrs. Begley on the question. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? 500.
I move to appoint Joyce Viega to an election poll worker, Precinct 5, to a term to expire no later than June 30th, 2013.
I have a motion made by Mrs. Winslow, seconded by Mrs. Begley on the question. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Abstained? 500.
Meeting minutes. I move to approve the meeting minutes of May 22nd, 2012 as written.
Motion made by Mrs. Winslow, seconded by Mr. Titlebaum. Question. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Abstained? 500.
I move to approve the meeting minutes of June 12th, 2012 as written.
Motion made by Mrs. Winslow, seconded by Mr. Titlebaum. Question. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Abstained? 500.
I move to approve the meeting minutes of June 26, 2012 as written.
Motion made by Mrs. Winslow, seconded by Mr. Titlebaum. Question, Mr. Slavin.
One correction on page 2, second paragraph. Business on Main Street will be holding Main Street Madness. It says July 29th. It should be July 20th. Second paragraph. The
Okay.
business on Main Street will be hosting Main Street Madness.
So I'll amend my motion to have the office correct that error, that typo.
Thank you.
Motion made and seconded with edit. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Abstain, 500.
I move to approve and hold the executive session meeting minutes from May 8th.
Motion made by Mrs. Winslow to approve and hold May 8th.
Second.
Second by Mr. Slavin. Question? All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Abstain? 302.
Mr. Chair, we have SOAR business. Any SOAR business? There's nothing listed.
Mr. Campino? Please, Guy, just a quick update. We know we got the questions. I think the last traffic I saw was like 3/4 of the way there, almost all the way there. You were typing today?
Yes, I was typing today.
That's a
Good evening,
scary
Mr.
thought,
Chairman.
brother.
Very scary.
Yes.
Trust me, very scary. I have, as of 5 o'clock this evening, I have the questions from CDM Smith.
Yeah.
So I have their questions and responses. I'll review those. We're done. We're at Attorney Bowen. He's reviewing them, and we'll speak with him tomorrow, finalize all that.
Yeah.
So we're pretty well set. We have the responses all prepared.
No cancellations for Saturday. Everybody's still
So far,
on board.
everybody is going to be there. Board of Selectmen, Town Administrator, Municipal Maintenance Director, myself,
Yep.
Mr. Deshays from a Betterment Law Firm, and Mike Judici and Chris Sharp from CDM Smith are planning to be there at 10 o'clock. Now, they're asking for lunch and dinner, and I said it's not going to be provided, so. Just wanted to be aware.
Nonetheless, they're paying for it.
Well, I just, they, maybe reference to the length of the meeting, but nonetheless, they all plan to be there. So we'll be there at 10 o'clock and
And it's
ready.
been a few weeks since the last poll, so yeah, I just wanted to
Yes,
mention
I've
that
actually,
because I have a feeling you're leaving, so I just want to mention that too.
I've actually, getting back on track, I've ignored policies for the past month, trying to wrap up the year. I've got a lot going
Understood.
on, so trust me, I'm getting them all together. I'll present them, and then we'll take them in orderly fashion as you see fit, but I'll get back
Understood.
on track very shortly.
Understood.
Mr. Chair,
Anything else?
just a reminder, I will not be present on the 14th. When we scheduled the date, I advised that I had a prior commitment.
Mrs. Winslow will not be here. How did you miss
I apologize. When I say Board of Selectmen, I'm speaking generally, so I
that? Mrs.
I
Begley?
apologize.
I just have a question because we certainly get billed for everything. Is CDM or any of the parties that had to furnish the information charging us for this?
Not to my knowledge. No one said. I mean, that's a very good question because very rarely do we get anything for nothing. The attorney said to me that he would donate his time, so that's fact. Obviously, the town's donating their time. CDM Smith has not suggested that they're going to be billing, but bluntly, I don't think we should pay them if they do. But nonetheless,
won't
I will make that clear to Mr. Judici that we expect their attendance. But
As
yet
part
there
of
will
as
be
part
no
of the money they've
compensation.
already been
Yes,
paid.
I agree.
Well, that's a concern because we'll.
I hear you.
Valid.
Well,
Keep getting
we
these-
didn't think of that, did we?
That's valid. No, it's a
we
valid.
hadn't thought of that, but
That's right, it's
nobody's
valid.
getting paid.
Right, so if they're going to attend this workshop, this is going to be included in the contract that's already been paid. We're not going to get, here's the X number of hours that we spent in Wareham on July 14th.
I thought you were raising your hand to say that you were buying lunch.
Yeah, no.
That's not
Yeah,
happening.
I'll buy it with my stipend. My other question is, so what expense is, if any, is being incurred to furnish all this information?
Just paper, ink,
just
our
wanna be
machines,
sure.
our time. That's it. There's really no hard expenses being incurred at this point in time. But no, it's just time, manpower, paper, and that sort of thing. So
I think this should be made to all parties that are attending crystal clear, correct?
I agree.
Right, yeah.
I will get that out tomorrow
Yeah, we're fine.
to all parties that
They won't have an issue.
I believe you're correct. But it's a valid point. We should make it clear,
All right.
just because.
Yeah, don't
Thank
assume.
you. And
That's
let's
right, I
make
agree.
sure that we get that stuff out as early tomorrow as we can. And
Soon as
don't forget to call Mrs. Gomes, please.
I will
And then
definitely
we
do
can
that. And,
get that email out as well. Thank you, Guy.
Okay, thank you.
Next up.
Mr. Chair, next up, we have town business budget transfers. We have, just so everybody knows, we have an
Who's on this? You?
updated list in our packet, which is stamped agenda item, so that would replace the spreadsheet that you had in your packet.
Good evening, gentlemen.
Good evening.
Just everybody have the right page with the red stamp that says agenda item? Mr. Chair, you have the right one? Because it's significantly different, so. You got it, Mr. Slavin. There you go.
Good
You got-
evening, Mr.
everybody got it?
Kudish. Would you want to introduce yourself again to the general public, being still kind of new?
Good evening. I'm Brian Kudish. I'm the new town accountant. I started here on May the 21st.
Thank you.
Thank you.
How's it going so far?
So far, so good.
You enjoying it?
Learning every day.
Ah, well, that was probably not a good thing to say.
In a good way.
You're not supposed to be learning how to do it. You're supposed to already know how to do it. I'm teasing, Brian. I'm hearing very good things. Mr. Sullivan, good evening.
Good evening, Derek Sullivan, financial analyst. I'm a bit of an old toy, so I think most
Yeah.
people know me
Well,
so far.
You're about to get played with, so go ahead.
It's kind of like Woody and
Who's
Buzz
got
Lightyear.
this, guys? Who's doing this? You or both of you together?
The accounting department has put this together.
Okay.
Are you going to go through it, or?
Proceed.
Would you like me to go through each?
Well, I already have some questions, but if you're going to go through it, then
Uh,
maybe for the general public, you should.
okay, these are line item transfers based upon monies from other departments to transfer to other departments that ran into a deficit during the year for either unforeseen reasons, such as the hurricane for municipal maintenance, or something that wasn't budgeted correctly, such as the FICA, or unforeseen bills, such as the legal negotiation with the union, or just monies that or expenses that came up during the year that was unforeseen.
Okay.
Mr. Chair,
Yes?
may I ask my questions
Sure,
now?
go right ahead.
Thank you.
Yeah, I don't think it needs to go through every single line item.
No, I don't either, but just a general.
Sure.
Sure, please.
First question I have is for the legal services. The Board of Selectmen approve the legal bills before they're paid. That's our policy. And we have $58,801 in legal bills. We budgeted, and when we hired our flat fee town council, we understood there may be some excess costs, but I'm pretty sure that we agreed with the former town administrator that those costs would be contained. Now, I went back through everything I have, and I don't have a single bill that we approved outside of some bills for Attorney Whitten and the bills for town council. So I'm wondering where $58,801 came from.
$63,000 came from the negotiation with the attorney with the union.
I understand that, but I'm
Right.
wondering why it is that those bills were never given to the Board of Selectmen for approval and payment. And I'm sure you've only just gotten here,
Correct.
but I just, mostly so that we're all on the same page, this is a very large number. And when we budgeted this line item, it was at about $200,000, and we all agreed that we could live within that $200,000. And now, 11 days after the fiscal year closes, we find out that we're close to $60,000 in bills when we only had $13,000 additional dollars in that account. So maybe Mr. Sullivan can explain this. Somebody's got to give me a real reasonable explanation for this.
I can give you an explanation. I don't know whether you'll consider it reasonable. However, we received you would call it an omnibus bill, one bill for an entire year's services in June of this year, which means I couldn't do anything with it through the May special town meeting. So this is the only option that we have for it. We're speaking with Labor Council now to make sure that we're receiving monthly billing, because a full year billing at the end of the year for municipality, for any of us on our own budgets, is harsh, to say the least.
Well, and my next question, Mr. Sullivan, is were we even aware that we were running up a bill like this? I mean, we had $12,500 additional dollars above and beyond what we committed in our contract with town council. Was anybody watching the store here?
I don't know about the comment, but to tell you the truth, no. There's I I certainly didn't know that we had a bill of $63,000 outstanding for legal services for union contracts.
I mean, and I realize that this isn't necessarily your responsibility, and I understand that, but Mr. Chair, through you to the interim town administrator, if we can keep a better eye on this going forward in this fiscal year, I mean, we're way outside of our budget here with this.
Well, I guess I would ask, who did you think was doing? We knew that Mr. Bowen's firm, I mean, I haven't seen this bill myself, but we knew that Mr. Bowen's firm was not doing labor.
We did.
We all knew that.
The night that we appointed Mr. Bowen's firm and we talked about the cost and the budgeted line item, I said to the former town administrator, are we going to be able to stay within our budget? And he assured me that yes, we would.
Well, he went over.
Significant. We're not, this isn't like, I expect we may go a little bit over, but this is significantly over.
I think it was 2 1/4. What was that?
No,
2
about
1/4.
200,000 was in the line item.
Yeah.
So we're,
I don't know who you expected to do the labor negotiations. They negotiated pretty much all of the contracts over the last year. They weren't doing it for free.
no, I'm not suggesting that they were doing it for free. What I'm saying is that we need to know where we stand in that line item, and we also, you know, are supposed to see these bills, and I'm glad that the Attorney Emerson will be billing us on a monthly basis so that this board can know where we're at, but we need to budget our line items appropriately to accommodate what we need, and all I'm asking is that we keep a close eye on this because we do have a contract. Our budget is very close to that contract.
I don't have any argument with that.
So
The
I'm just
only thing
asking-
I'm asking you is, who did you think was doing this work?
I knew that someone was doing this work, but I had no idea that we were $58,000 out for that. So all I'm asking is if Mr. Foster, during his tenure as interim, can, you know, keep an eye on this situation, make sure that we get the bills, please. I mean, I know we have some here tonight, and I appreciate that. That's important. Legal bills should not be paid if they have not been approved by this board. So, my next question, this is going to sound a little harsh, but I have to ask it because, you know, we're in the middle of a financial crisis, and I have a list of unforeseen expenses, and this includes a Joseph statue, lights at Town Hall, wreaths and bows. I understand that these things are important, but the total for the Christmas celebration is almost $1,300. We spent, we had the Vet Memorial, Hurricane Irene, which obviously, you know, that's a separate issue. We spent money on the Polar Express, and what is onset sprinkler?
I don't know.
I would imagine, has there been a sprinkler system
some
put
kinda-
inside onset recently for, is there a town flowers or display? Oh.
Anything to do with the onset on the beach over there with the police? Any kind of sprinkler system installed in a building? Yeah. Anything irrigation?
I don't think so, no.
Well, the onset sprinkler was $3,500.
And what is that, onset mobile?
The onset mobile home park, is this related to the drainage issue? These costs?
I don't know, but I can certainly have an answer for you
The
tomorrow.
spreadsheet-
Okay.
I can email you.
The spreadsheet is not, this spreadsheet is cut off. I mean, you have-
Yeah, it's hard
we're
for us
missing
to.
the columns of the explanations there.
Yeah, this is the one we're looking at, the one that says unforeseen expenses. And, you know, far be it for me to be Scrooge, but we have to, we've really got to keep an eye on these line items. $1,300 for Christmas lights and wreaths and bows is not an unforeseen expense. It's just not. I mean, if we didn't have the money budgeted in the line item, you can't spend it. I mean, perhaps we could have gotten that stuff donated, or, you know, but
Derek, any other questions there?
I had one more question, but it may have
These
actually...
two gentlemen, and just to be clear to the listening group, these two gentlemen didn't make these decisions.
No, and I understand that, and I believe
They're
I said
reporting
before
to
that
the
I
board.
understood, you know, that this Mr. Kudish wasn't here, and Mr. Sullivan serves in a capacity where he's not the one making these decisions. But going forward, I want to make sure that we're clear. Every year we get kind of this list, and every year I get a little testy about it. But you know, I think it's just, it doesn't look good for us to spend money on things that aren't a necessity when we're cutting services and telling people that we can't afford other things. It just, but my other question, I think, was answered when you updated this spreadsheet, so I think I'm done, Mr. Chair.
Spegley, questions? Yeah, no. Alan? Mr. Slavin, I apologize.
Hi, Derek. Hi, Brian.
Hi.
I've got some questions that go to the basis of what we do. Under Mass General Law, Chapter 44, Section 33B, when we do transfers, we have a basic $5,000 or 3% of the budget that we're allowed to transfer, period. And I believe some of these items exceeds those numbers, whether they're aggregate or in total or separately. So I think some of these things they're asking transfers for we can't do. The problem is a two-edged sword. If we don't make the transfer, we're in deficit spending, and we have a problem there. If we do make it, we're violating Mass General Law. I have a problem personally signing any of these transfer requests when they violate Mass General Law.
Mr. Chair. Yeah, but I think Attorney Bowen can answer.
We'll go from there. The other question I have is when we get into the municipal maintenance and we have shortage due to the FEMA, my question is on the money that came back from FEMA, was the monies returned by percentage of expense to each one of the departments? Was there commingling of some of the expenses? Because the amount of money asked for by the municipal maintenance, the dollar amount seems to be a higher percentage left that they have to cover than any of the other departments that would have been involved. I just don't see how the money got distributed, so I have a question on that as well. I don't expect you to answer right now because I'm sure you weren't prepared for it. But just these are things that I need to have some answers on.
Okay.
But I believe that there's at least 4 or 5 items that definitely fall against the Chapter 44.
And did we not get we did get some reimbursement to this point from that storm, did we not, Derek?
Yes, we received reimbursement. We received 75% of what was approved. So if you put in, $200,000, you'd get $150,000. I don't know. I know that municipal maintenance received roughly, I believe, $178,000 in reimbursements. I don't know I don't have a list of what they actually requested, because you can request additional things as give time for the vehicle, the cost, if there's any sort of depreciation on the vehicle or run wear on it. So.
And the police got some back as well.
The police water pollution control facility received a lot of money back. Any of the departments that were involved in there. And when we received the money, it came back, and I received from Lieutenant Walczak in the first round a split of where the money went to. I don't know if that was allocated as percentage or how FEMA broke that down. But what I can do is get from the first payment and the second payment those breakdowns and ask the Lieutenant to give me an explanation on that we can further to the board.
Thank you very much.
Well.
Attorney Gordon, did you have a comment?
I believe the question went to Chapter 44, Section 33B. And I'll just read the applicable subsection, which is also B. The Selectmen, with the concurrence of the Finance Committee, may transfer within the last 2 months of any fiscal year or during the first 15 days of the new fiscal year to apply to the previous fiscal year any amount appropriated for the use of any department other than a municipal light department or a school department to the appropriation for any other department or within a department. Yeah, I know, it's great stuff. And I think here's the key part. But the amount transferred from one department to another or within a department may not exceed, in the aggregate, 3% of the annual budget of the department from or within which the transfer is made, or $5,000, whichever is greater. I'm not quite sure how the 3% aggregate or the 5,000 would line up with respect to these requests.
Mr. Chair, the reason that I had asked Attorney Bowen was because last year we made similar transfers under this Municipal Relief Act, very large dollar transfers to cover salary, overtime and such in the police department. And at the time, that wasn't quite the explanation that Mr. Bowen had given me about making those transfers. So it didn't seem to me that we had that limit. I mean, some of those transfers were very large.
Mr. Chairman, if I may, I'm sure the explanation I gave was straight out of the statute.
Mr. Slade?
Also on this, where we had the hurricane expense, which is basically unexpected expense, I think it would have been more appropriate to go to the Finance Committee and to their reserve looking for some of the money, because the DOR would accept that, because that's definitely an unanticipated, unexpected expense, which could have kept us out of some issues.
Have these been through the Finance Committee?
No, this would go to the Finance Committee meeting tomorrow night.
But there has to be a vote by the Board of Selectmen by July the 15th. Sorry? So we could accept a motion to approve pending subject to the approval. I think we had to do that last year as well, subject to the approval of the Finance Committee.
Well, yeah, but my question now is, Mr. Chair, is can we approve all of these because they're going to exceed the allowable amount?
I hadn't seen the updated version. I had notes on the old version, but with the new one, I can't give you the numbers.
Well, perhaps I don't remember correctly, but last year we also had large dollar amounts and it was okay for us to do it. So I'm just wondering what the difference is between last year and this year.
One, you get your hand slapped. The other one, you get your head slapped. That's the choice.
Yeah, if it's okay with you, Mr. Chair, to give sort of an explanation to the Board of Selectmen and to the listening audience at home. Both a deficit is illegal by nature. The transfers are illegal if you go over the 5%. There is no penalty for going over the 5%. If we have deficits at the end of the year, the penalty is what we had just gone over before. You're basically hit twice for it. Your free cash is reduced, then during the recap process, that is reduced as well. It's the lesser of two evils on this choice would be the simplest way to put it. I reached out to the Department of Revenue today, albeit it's very last minute, try and see if I could get our rep to speak to this, because it's my understanding that according to the DOR, and I don't have any backup to say this, but that they would much rather prefer that we do not have illegal deficits.
Sure, and didn't I just sign a letter to that effect?
You did.
Most recently.
You did. And I appreciate that.
Yeah.
Mr. Chair. So based on the information that Mr. Slavin brought up and Attorney Bowen confirmed, we're being asked to do something that would break the law.
Huh?
But it's okay to break this law.
No. I didn't say that.
But that's what this is what I'm trying to get straight in my head. I don't want to sit here on TV and do something that's against the law.
Well, I guess the issue is if we don't do something, then we're going to be in worse shape at the end of the year. And the other thing is we haven't sat down and crunched all of these numbers to see whether any single one of these transfers would be in violation. I mean, we can assume that maybe one or two are, but I have no evidence before me regarding any of these departments' budgets, what the percentage would be or anything else. So I think we have a Hobson's choice here.
Well, I
and we
mean,
pick the lesser of two evils and move on.
the smaller ones we know are going to be okay. Those aren't an issue. But you know, for example, what was it? 3%.
3% or 5,000, whichever is greater.
So what's 3% of $200,000?
$6 million?
No.
I'm sorry.
I'm not a math major, by the way.
So that one might be okay because that's
6,000.
Oh, 3%. I thought you were looking the other way.
No.
It's $6,000.
Nice try, though, Peter.
$6,000. So that one's way in excess. And the municipal maintenance budget, the overall budget is
So the choice is,
It's not municipal
you
maintenance.
don't
It's the
approve
place
it,
it's coming
and
from.
they'll-
Oh,
they'll
it's
hit us
coming
twice
from.
and take this out of your free cash for next year. It's the board's. Mrs. Becker.
That was my point. That was going to be my point. I understand the point that Selectman Winslow was trying to make, but I'm also understanding the point that Mr. Sullivan has certainly made, and we would suffer for this moving forward by not approving these transfers. Now, my other question is, will the Finance Committee, I mean, do we have to wait for their approval or their recommendation? Is that what you're saying to me, Mr. Bowen?
Yes.
So we can certainly vote in the affirmative to make these transfers conditional to that, because we have to have an answer by what Mr. Sullivan said by the 15th. Is that correct? Because we are not meeting to discuss this.
With your permission, Mr. Chairman, what the statute says is that the selectmen, with the concurrence of the Finance Committee, may make these transfers. So you could vote in whatever fashion you want tonight. And if the Finance Committee does not concur, then the whole thing's dead. So the Finance Committee, in essence, can veto whatever it is you decide to do in whole or in part. Not to go all constitutional on you, I suppose they could even do line item vetoes on this if they chose to do it. And as to the timing, the statute says this can be only done, quote, during the first 15 days of the new fiscal year.
So yes, the answer is yes. We have until the 15th of July.
Thanks.
Mr. Chairman? Does the board want to entertain posting a meeting for 9 o'clock on Saturday morning? Therefore, the Finance Committee would have made their decisions. And some of these items might get eliminated, but they may take care of it.
We have a meeting on Saturday.
Can't we just vote on it now, and then if they're either going to veto it or they're not, so we're just going to have another meeting. So we either vote for it now, or we don't, and then the Finance Committee votes, or they don't. But having a second meeting to rehash nothing's going to change here.
Okay. My name is Mr. Foster.
If the issue is the 3%, if they went back and ran the 3% numbers, and if there was a difference that could be transferred out of the reserve fund, what's remaining in the reserve fund, to cover these, to get it down to the acceptable level, is that something you could take a vote on, these numbers today? And if the Finance Committee tomorrow could have new numbers, and maybe they could transfer money out of the reserve fund to get to that level that's acceptable?
Mr. Chair, if that's an option, I had to feel much better about that, because when we had this issue last year and we talked about the numbers, we said we were going to be more on top of it for this year, and this is much better. This is a much better list, I have to admit. But even if we're picking between the lesser of two evils, I still would prefer that we do this the correct way, if at all possible.
Through you. The problem we have right now, if we ask, we would have to make a request to the FinCom for the transfers out of the reserve account. We don't have those actual numbers in front of us here, because I don't have the budget sitting here in front of me, unfortunately, to figure out 3% or $5,000 for each item.
But the town administrator can make that request once they figure out the numbers.
They can make the request, but we're voting on a dollar number. What we would have to vote on is something without a dollar number.
Well, we're going to vote on a total dollar number, and we're going to predicate that on the town administrator and the financial analyst ensuring that the numbers are compliant.
Then we're going to request the town administrator to go ahead and do that tomorrow before they meet.
That he just
Part of our
offered.
part of our vote then.
Yeah, that was his idea. Does
He
he?
didn't offer to do it. He just
Yes.
said that was an idea.
As long as town council feels that this is acceptable, then I could vote for that. But if it sits the way it is, I can't vote for it.
He says thumbs up. Can I have a motion?
Mr. Chair, I move to transfer a total amount of $229,901 to cover a total projected deficit in the FY12 operating budget of $229,901 by using the 3% $5,000 and/or reserve fund transfers as necessary to be determined by the interim town administrator and the financial analyst and presented to the finance committee tomorrow. No, not him? Oh, and the town accountant. The dream team.
Second.
That was just a comment.
Motion made. Second. Question.
I don't have a question, but I do want to apologize for dumping all this work on you guys.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? Abstain? 500.
Thank you. Sorry for the extra work.
Thank you, guys.
Well, Mr. Chair, can we, I mean, that was an important point that Mr. Slavin brought up, and one that I didn't realize was going to play a part in this. So is it possible for us to sort of take a closer look at this maybe halfway through the year and see where we may be developing these problems?
That certainly can be done.
I would make a suggestion, we can discuss it at the next meeting of the agenda, that we maybe form an audit committee. It's a simple committee of, but what I'd suggest is possibly taking a member from the Board of Selectmen, a member from the FinCom, and a member from the outside public that has skills, and they just go every quarter and tell us where we are versus our budget.
Well, maybe we can put it on the next agenda.
We'll put it on
but-
the agenda to discuss
Yeah.
it fully, but maybe that would be an assistance to the town as well. Because it doesn't do us any good come June to figure out where we're at. It's too late already.
It's much better than it was last year.
Correct.
So we've made progress, and, you know, kudos to you guys, the three of you, for getting us where we were.
You guys have anything else on this agenda, the two of you?
CETA bill.
Yes.
We have the approval of certificate of vote for CETA. Is that the one you're talking about? No?
Brian, you on that as well?
I don't have an invoice.
Yes, you do. It's right there.
Powers and Sullivan invoice for CETA.
Mr. Pena? We'll take this out of order so these gentlemen can get back to home. If there's no objection. Good evening.
Good evening.
Good evening.
The issue is, we're billed, Cedar is being billed,
$20,000.
Oh, this because Mr. Sullivan's involved, is that why we're doing this now?
I just noted we were second on the agenda, so I assumed that was why we were here.
Yeah, this deals, I'm sorry, this is not that. This deals with the audit bill.
Yes.
Correct?
That's
What
correct.
we're discussing the audit bill, not the Witten bill.
Right.
And basically what happened is that the town administrator had audits done, and Mr. Sullivan can go into more detail. And a bill was generated to CETA for, I believe, $20,000 of that share. Is that correct?
That is correct.
And this was actually an audit that was done by the town. CETA has issues with paying the bill. I thought it was a little outrageous myself when it came up at our meeting. And therefore, we're here tonight to discuss it and make some kind of a recommendation. Mr. Sullivan, you got anything?
Just a comment.
Mrs. Connaughton, go ahead.
We did receive the invoice. I think it's dated 2/9/2012, and
Right.
it's for work performed as of June 30th, 2010. So that's the
Which
first
is another
point.
issue.
And there's others, but we'll listen to Mr. Sullivan.
All right, round two for me here. What I have in front of me, and I don't know if the board has a copy, was the Powers and Sullivan engagement letter. It was signed by the then interim town administrator who, on September 17th, 2009. I can't read it, but I would imagine that was Mr. Sanjanet at that point. Mr. Pina wouldn't have known about this, nor would the other gentleman's the interim. Peter Sanborn would not have known of this as well, because this is dating back to when Christopher Riley was the CETA director. The Powers and Sullivan engagement letter states in there, Community and Economic Development Authority, CETA audit engagement. It gives some of the background of what chapter and acts created CETA. That said, the town desires a separate audit of the activities of CETA, which will perform for 2009 through 2011 fiscal years. Since CETA has not been audited in the past, the actual size and nature and complexity of the financial reporting is not currently known. We will track our time and expenses separately for the FY 2009 engagement in order to properly bill CETA for the audit. We do not expect the FY 2009 fee to exceed $10,000, and our fee will be based on the standard hourly rates plus expenses. After the audit for FY 2009 is completed, we will propose a fixed fee amendment to this engagement letter for fiscal years 2010 and 2011. If you look at the Powers and Sullivan bill, you'll see that this is for through FY 2010, so that would include fiscal years 2009 and fiscal years 2010. You'll see there's a reduction of $8,930 that Powers and Sullivan, for lack of a better word, ate those fees because they said it would cost roughly $10,000 per year. That's noted as a courtesy discount. And that is where we stand here today with the audit.
A couple of questions come to mind. Who actually requested the audit? Was it the Board of Selectmen? Was it the CETA board?
We don't have a record of it. We checked back, and we cannot locate a record of it. We did check, and we could not find a record of anyone authorizing it, either the CETA board or any of the interim director or the past director. But there's one more issue that I did want to bring up that was brought to our attention, which I think was one of the other issues why we discussed this at our meeting, is that the federal law provides for the payment of audits under these following conditions. Audits are considered an administrative expense, must be paid from funds that are subject to an administrative cap, I guess similar to what you were just discussing. 20% cap for federal dollars, 18% cap for the state. Community and Development Block Grant is a grant to the town of Wareham, and the block grant funds may be used to pay for a portion of a city or town audit. But federal and state law requires that funds may only be used to pay a proportional share, which essentially means that if other departments within the town received grants and were being audited, then they should be paying a proportional amount. So that was the point of us coming in for discussion.
Right. Mr. Sullivan?
I believe it was for grants over $250,000. Is that correct, Mr. Pina?
Actually, it was 300,000, and more recently it moved to 500,000.
To 500.
But Derek, let me make one point. The grant goes to the municipality, in this case, the town of Wareham. So that issue is for the town of Wareham. So if the town of Wareham has more than $500,000 in grants, then that issue applies.
So that would be an aggregate number of the grants from federal government.
That exceed 500,000. So, for example, if a nonprofit got a grant from the government for 250,000, they'd not be subject to A133, which is the single audit requirement. But if they got a grant for 550,000, then they would be subject to that.
I guess the only other large grant that we have, and now I'm hearing that's an aggregate amount, would be the school department, for which there's actually 2 audits paid. One is for the town's portion, and one is the school does itself, specifically for its grants as well. The real issue here is $20,000 will have to be paid out of the FY12 budget from the town if CETA does not pay it. And that's my concern, and that's actually, we could decrease some of our transfers here if we didn't have to pay $20,000 for this. We've got the engagement letter, and realistically, the only thing, this doesn't hurt me as a person, but I feel it hurts the town. It hurts the town by $20,000.
Mrs. Begley, comment, question?
Let me try to gather my thoughts here. What's the date on the engagement letter?
September 16th, 2009.
So, did you happen to look at the Board of Selectmen meeting minutes around that date? By any chance?
I have not.
And I guess I would look at that, and I would also look at the town administrator's report around that time and see if there was any discussion about something like this. So that engagement letter is the only documentation that you have that retained Powers and Sullivan. There's no. Do you have a copy of a contract, or does Powers and Sullivan have a copy of a contract for that particular project?
The engagement letter contains the project in there and would be considered the contract on there.
Thank you.
Mr. Winslow?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just 2 observations. There was a lot of talk around that time about auditing, and CETA was a big topic of discussion because it had never been audited. The Board of Selectmen at that time was very concerned, and there had been some rumors, if you will, abound that we may have lost grant opportunities and things like that. So it was a priority for this to be done. Whether the board ever voted on it, I do not recall. But there was definitely conversation, and if you look at the minutes or watch the tapes, you can hear it. That's number 1. Number 2, I don't recall Chris Riley ever having the ability to sign off on a contract. And now I realize we're talking about an engagement letter as opposed to a contract, and those, I see Mr. Kudish smiling back there, the two different things. But this brings to light a bigger issue that we're going to discuss up next, and that is when people put their name on a dotted line and commit the town without the knowledge of the people that they report to, years later, we're trying to figure out who's going to take the hit for $20,000. And now something that seemed quite innocent at the time has turned into a big problem. That's all, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Slavy.
I've reviewed the contract with our letter of engagement. It's pretty clear. I think we need to go back at the same time frame and check what DOR reported to us and what Powers and Sullivan had reported to us as things we were laxed in, or whether we had to do things. We have many different accounts that back at that time that weren't being audited properly, and they had issues on procedure, etc. Matter of fact, it's been going on for 10, 12 years. It's not just recently. And this may have been one of the requirements for them to give a fully qualified auditor as well. Unfortunately, Chris Riley didn't sign anything. It was the acting town administrator that is the only signature on that document. The CETA director would not have authorized it because it would have gone through the CETA board.
So it was authorized by the town
Yeah.
administrator.
Acting town administrator authorized it.
Mr. Titlebaum.
Since we're discussing this work, have either of you actually seen this audit, or do we have it in whose custody is it at the present time?
I haven't seen the audit.
It's in CETA's. It's in CETA's hands. One of the employees came over to take it from us, saying that they paid for it. They should have it.
Well,
Wasn't me.
If I might make a comment.
Mrs. Kanan.
If I understand it correctly, they would be required to attach that to the grant application. There is a letter from Powers and Sullivan that I believe that should have been attached to the grant. That's the only explanation I have.
And so you're asking the board to what?
Well, if I can just interject for a second. There are a couple of challenges here. The first, I think just in terms of procedure, if the grant goes to the town of Wareham, so it is not CETA's grant.
Right.
And therefore, CETA would not have requested an audit. And if they did, they would have had to have that authorized through the CETA board, and then there would have had to have been an allocation put aside, because all of the grant funds we get are through an application process. So there would have had to been built into a budget a fee for an audit.
Right.
That's the first challenge. The second challenge is that 2009 grant is closed, so that's closed out. That grant is done and over, and all the money spent for that. And the 2010 grant is just about closed. So the two grants in question are both closed out. The third piece that I think is significant is the issue related to the administrative funds. Because audits are an administrative expense, you have to pull those out of a line that is capped. That line that ultimately is capped. So even if there were dollars available, they would have to be available under that cap. And the issue related to the proportional share is really important, because the federal law prohibits paying for it unless the town would be able to show that each of the other grants in the town pay a proportion of the audit. So if other grants were audited during that time period, they would have to pay a proportional share. So there'd have to be a methodology that determines what proportion. So $20,000 may or may not be the correct number if you were able to demonstrate a proportional methodology.
Right.
Mr. Chairman.
I understand. It would be a nightmare to try to parse that at this point. So long down the road after.
Mr. Chairman, Powers and Sullivan is widely regarded as the best auditors available in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. Isn't that what we've heard? And they weren't aware of this?
This has nothing to do with Powers and Sullivan. It's about, the question is, who's paying the bill?
Right, but Powers and
That's the
Sullivan
question.
wasn't aware of all these requirements that we're hearing about when they signed their engagement letter, and to ensure that they met these.
They provided a service to the town of Wareham and gave us a bill for it. How that bill is paid is determined by the town of Wareham, not Powers and Sullivan. And the question before us is, CEDAR never authorized the work to be done, and the whole issue of prorating funds, I think at this point we just pay it out of the funds that Mr. Sullivan has put aside to deal with that, because the federal issues of our grant money, and trying to go back now with grants that are closed, and I know I signed those letters saying that they were closed. I'm not apt to support taking money out of something I already signed that said it was complete.
Right.
And that would really be a problem. Talk about, that's not just fudging the law. I think that would be breaking the law.
Mr. Chair, I can just give you
I'm not comfortable with that.
No, absolutely.
Spending money out of a grant that's already closed.
Right. I can just give you one example. In Attleboro, where I was before I came here, we had a very similar issue. Our auditor had pulled $1,500 out of a grant, out of the block grant, to pay for the audit, and the HUD auditors came in and picked that up, and they required the town to repay it.
Right.
So the town had to repay the $1,500 back to HUD, or again, conversely, show the proportional share of all the other grants.
But I think the only misunderstanding I had here, and it seems a little more clear now listening to Mr. Sullivan, is that apparently, and we don't have any proof or documentation, apparently this was not a town-wide audit.
No.
So what I'm thinking is, I think when we first started talking about this, it was a town-wide audit. CETA was part of that audit, right? And so then you take the proportional number. But it sounds like somebody did this specifically for CETA. Is that correct, Mr. Sullivan?
Yes, that was a specific single audit for CETA, and actually on the in the audit objectives, it mentions right in there going for the all the internal controls with OMB Circular A133. So it's
yeah. Unfortunately, that was never.
Yeah, and I can understand the money's. I'm not looking to fight. It's only an explanation of what's gone out, and we need to figure out for the future, because there's still, I believe, FY11's audit would be for $10,000, so that we don't. I have to know whether I have to budget for that.
Is Mrs. Connaught, are you aware of that?
I'm not. We have not had the communication, unfortunately.
Are we able to deal with, what was it, 211?
211.
Are we able to deal with that through the grant?
I can go back and look. I know we have that grant open.
Because that's still open.
That grant is open, and I can go back and look at that.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
may I ask a question?
Sure.
Mr. Sullivan, where's the money coming from?
The audit line has the extra 20,000 in it right now.
Extra 20. Was that letter, the contractual letter, was that for an ongoing annual audit, or was it for a one-time audit?
It was for fiscal years June 30th, 2009, 2010, 2011, so it'd be a 3-year engagement.
Okay. That's interesting. So, right, so you're saying that it's $20,000 for the 2 years, and then we're going to have $10,000 coming up, and that's what Mr. Holmes was addressing with Mr. Pina.
Correct. That would be my understanding. The 20,000 was for FY09, FY10.
I understand.
Yeah. Okay.
I understand.
Close.
And so it's unfortunate that we're going to pay $20,000, and I almost wish I had a copy of it here. But Mr. Pina, could that be returned to Mr. Sullivan's office? The results of that audit?
Absolutely.
That'd be great.
Okay. Anything else? Can I get a motion?
What kind of motion are you looking for, Mr.
Well,
Chair?
I think you're looking for an answer, either town or CETA, correct? Is that what we're doing?
Yeah, I would say we figure out what we're going to do for 2009, 2010, and then going forward. And
I would accept a motion that said,
Mr. Foster is raising his hand.
Yeah,
All right.
speak up.
You got to really talk loud, Joe.
Going forward, are we going to have this audit for the CETA department each year and pay for it out of the town funds?
Question.
What we're trying to look into is for the latest one is to take that money out of administrative cost of the grant money and break it down the way it's supposed to be done.
Yeah.
So the answer to your question is no.
Yeah.
But for the 2 years in question, we can't open those. Those grants are closed. There's no way you can go back and dip in and say, "Oh, we had, extra fees here."
Yeah, I don't think CETA is objecting to paying for an audit for the grant. It is the town's grant. So if the town wants to pay for that portion of the audit out of the block grant, that's fine. It needs to just be budgeted in advance and authorized in advance, and so that the money's there.
Right.
And I think that's the only thing that I would
We're
say.
trying to clean up these the old one.
Right, so that is a requirement that needs to be audited each year because of the size of the grant.
Well, the single audits, the A133 audits, over $500,000, but it's not just that grant. It would be any federal grants that the town has that are over $500,000, federal grants.
Okay. Anybody else?
One question. Now, we have, the contract was through 2011 fiscal year. What about 2012 and on? There's no contract, correct?
Well, we have to pull out the audit contract because there is an engagement letter for FY 12, 13, 14, I believe, and we'll have to find out who signed that. And I believe it's the same thing. And
well, you know, I really think that CETA and the Board of Selectmen, because actually we're the leaders and own CETA, somebody's signing these agreements and making these arrangements, and the seven of us are sitting here, and Mrs. Connaughton's board, not aware of it.
I think that's
a problem.
If I may, Mr. Chairman, that
Sure.
going for the 12, 13, 14, this is the time to speak with Powers and Sullivan, see whether CETA doesn't want to be a part of that, wants to do their own, wants to do what have you. Because Mr. Pina and I have spoken. He's been very gracious about
Sure.
it. So, he's been very good to me. So,
And it may make sense to do it that way, but some authorization from CETA needs to be present. It needs to happen. Because your board would then be paying $10,000, and when we sit there and, 15 for this and 20 for this, and there needs to be 10 in there out of the appropriate grant to pay for this audit.
Well, Mr. Holmes.
We don't have that at this point.
Right.
Mr. Holmes, just going forward, as you said, if there's a contractual letter that somehow, I mean, I'd love to see a copy of that if that could come to the board. But the date of this invoice is February 9th, 2012, and it's Town of Wareham to Mr. Peter Sanborn. So was CETA office actually getting these invoices, or was the Town of Wareham receiving these invoices? I mean, our Mr. Sullivan or any of the other people that received the invoices for our town, because I mean, this is the first I'm seeing this, and this is February 9th, 2012, and it went to Mr. Sanborn.
I think the clearest way to explain how I got into this fund is when we were receiving a bill from Powers and Sullivan, they said that there was a past due bill from CETA. Would you mind if we forwarded it to you and you could bring that over to them?
When was that?
That would have been roughly, I think, Mr. Pena, when did we start speaking about 6 weeks ago?
Yeah, probably about 6 weeks ago, yeah.
So the invoices had been received. I mean, it's addressed correctly, Mr. Peter Sanborn, Interim Director, 54 Marion Road. So this was up to $20,000, so this is the 2 fiscal years, correct?
Correct.
Interesting.
And then that was brought forward to the CETA meeting, right?
6 weeks ago?
Huh?
6 weeks ago?
No, about 4 weeks ago, I think.
But even so, I mean, this bill's
No, I
been
understand. I'm just saying
outstanding for some time.
that this isn't the first time it went to the CETA board, and the CETA board objected to that, and that's why it's here tonight.
Yeah, when Derek gave me the invoice about 6 weeks ago, I immediately put it on the agenda for our CETA board meeting to discuss it with them because I had no prior knowledge of the award. So I brought it to them and asked, how should we manage this? That was sort of the question that I brought to them.
But someone in the office was receiving these invoices.
I think I get your point. I'm just saying now,
Right,
in the
but
light
now
of day.
all the players know,
First one I saw.
in the last 6 weeks, from what I'm hearing, we're just addressing this from 6 weeks, and this is 2 fiscal years. So last fiscal year, there was an invoice that went to Mr. Sanborn or, his office, and
I don't think
this
he was
year,
here.
it's unfortunate.
Yeah.
I was of the impression that this was the first copy that we received. I mean, I see 2912 up here.
It's not, just to be fair, it's not date stamped as being received. So I don't know when it was actually received. That's the date of the invoice. I can certainly check in for you, Mrs. Bagley.
There's a stamp on it.
I will certainly check into that for you.
Good luck. Okay. we need to
One last thing.
move along. We'll be here at 3 o'clock on this.
Just real quickly, Derek, can you get us a copy of the current contract with Powers and Sullivan, number one? And number two, can you get us from Powers and Sullivan the 2 prior bills that make up the $20,000?
Yes.
Because there had to be invoices, and see if they have a record of who they sent it to.
Yes, I will.
Because obviously we have invoices that went into the circular file somehow. Because it didn't get to the departments where it needed to go.
Yeah, I would say the one thing on that is we may want to hold off on that assumption till we realize whether with what was going on from FY10 and such.
I
that-
apologize. I'm
yeah.
just being a little facetious right now. It makes me nervous when you have 2 years' worth of invoices, even with a big company like them, that they aren't banging on someone's door looking for their money up.
Understood.
2 years later. It doesn't make sense.
Just get ready.
Mr. Chair, we've already authorized the payment when we authorized the transfers.
Right.
So I don't really think that this
I
board.
think, yeah, I think we continue down that route. And then, but I think at this point, Mrs. Connaughton, if you could get that on your agenda to carry this fiscal year, because we're going to need to, while it's still open, get these administrative costs done, follow that route in the future. That's
Absolutely. I'll go back
That's
and
what I
research the
think.
budgets and
consensus there, Mrs. Bagley?
Yep.
Yeah, okay. Derek, have you got anything else on here?
I don't believe so.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Have a nice
Thank
ride
you.
home.
Thank you.
Mr. Pena, Mrs. Connaughton, on the certificate of vote, CETA.
Next on the agenda, the approval of certificate of vote for CETA.
Right. We had a discussion at the last CETA meeting. For any correspondence that goes between the town, see, the state recognizes the town of Wareham does not recognize our CETA authority as an entity. So any communication between the town and the state in regards to grants, etc., is signed for by the chairman of the Board of Selectmen. So whoever the chairman is at that time when these documents come in, I'll get a call from folks to say, oh, you know, this document's ready for your signature, that document, so I'll go in and sign them. We had a discussion at the CETA meeting last month about other things that, quite frankly, you know, we have a contractor, we just made a change to not put the layer down on that street, right? We changed the work orders and things like that. Quite frankly, myself or any chairman of the Board of Selectmen, I mean, it's ridiculous for me to go in there and sign that since I really have nothing to do with it on a day-to-day basis. So in terms of what I gathered on your request was that those day-to-day activities should be signed for by our CETA director, and of course he gets approval. Well, even some of those things you don't really do because you have nothing to do with it. It's day-to-day office stuff.
Right.
I'm the chairman of the Board of Selectmen really has. If they do have a clue as to what all that is, they really have too much time on their hands. That's their day-to-day operations. So we're bringing it before the board. The CETA board approved, I think, right? It was like
Yes, we did.
and so we're bringing it before the board tonight to allow Mr. Pena to sign documents and things with his contractors, et cetera, for day-to-day operations.
And Mr. Chair,
Yeah.
just
Now, if you would.
Yeah, point of clarification. What I've asked for is not to do anything, because I appreciate Mrs. Winslow's comment earlier about committing the town. What I'm talking about is not committing the town to money that doesn't exist, but only money that's already been approved. So, for example, within the boundaries of the $900,000 of the grant application that we get, we make loans for rehab projects, for example, to homeowners. Those are part of the pre-approved application process. It's an ongoing activity. Those loans need to be signed. We get mortgages that are paid off that need to be discharged. We track the payment. We know that the mortgage has been paid off. We would discharge those mortgages. These are the types of activities I'm talking about. I'm not talking about trying to commit the town to any kind of financial commitment that where we would not already have money in place.
Right. Questions? Mr. Titlebaum?
To the extent that this just seems like simple housekeeping and getting the proper signatory on there, and as Mr. Holmes says, if he knew all about what he was signing, he'd have too much time in his hands. I could certainly support this.
Thank you. Mr. Slavin?
CEDAR, as we all know, operates under two different acts, one in 1977 and one in 2004. We have experience in the 2004 not being very happy with the way it ended up. It basically gives the Board of Selectmen has to approve almost virtually everything. And it does allow the Board of Selectmen to delegate some of its responsibilities to the town administrator. The only issue I have with this is just a procedural piece that I don't believe, and town council is going to have to give us an answer, whether we as the Board of Selectmen can delegate our rights to the CEDAR director, because the Special Act of 2004 only gives us the ability to delegate certain responsibilities to the town administrator. And that's my only issue with this.
I think just an interesting point when Mr. Pina had brought the certificate to us, he pointed out that this was a copy or similar to the one that was in place when we had Miss Wally here and had been approved.
There were problems then.
So it was the exact same language.
And that was
there was
what?
no changes to it.
When was she here? 6 years ago? When was she
2000,
here?
she left in 2000, the fall of 2008, I
Eight.
believe.
2008, yep.
About 4 years ago.
Mr. Chair, it's my turn yet? Oh, are you finished, Mr.
You guys set? Mr. Begley. Go ahead.
Is he waiting for an answer, or? Oh, I'm sorry.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, to Mr. Slavin and the board members.
Rich, you got to get a little closer, please.
There we go. The certificate that you've got here that you're proposing to the Board of Selectmen is identical to the one that the CEDA board signed. And within the context of the CEDA board, it makes perfect sense, because you pretty much do your own thing in terms of day-to-day stuff, procurement, and all of that. So it seems very appropriate in that context. Where it gets a little bit thornier is when you take that same self-contained sort of document and transfer it to another entity, in this case the Board of Selectmen. I'll be perfectly honest with you and say I'm not entirely sure of what the correct answer is on this. I think that there is an issue of chain of delegation from Board of Selectmen to Town Administrator to CEDA. I do see that the certificate limits itself strictly to CEDA-related activities. So, for example, you're not going to be signing the deed to Town Hall over to some developer, so that's heartening. But, honestly, I think I'd like the opportunity, Mr. Chairman, to be able to sit down with Sal, maybe this Thursday when I'm in, and if we can just, sort of trace the lines of authority just to make sure that if the board voted something like this, that it has the authority to vote something like this. And on the flip side, just to make sure that in so voting, it's not delegating authority to you that couldn't properly be delegated.
Right. Where it is past practice, I mean, there is precedent in the CEDAR office for doing this. You know, the answer may be as simple as this board doesn't need to act on it at all. And that's office practice, and that might be the end of the story right there. But well, I don't see any issue with you reviewing that.
Mr. Pina, when was your hire date? I can't remember.
It was April 2nd.
And in reference to when there was a certain certificate of vote several years ago, there was also a huge contentious issue regarding that because the vision of the Board of Selectmen didn't necessarily match that of the director, and there ended up being an agreement that not everybody was happy with. The people that were involved, and we still have repercussions from that. Now, I do have a problem with this because I feel that the Board of Selectmen as a board needs to be involved with CETA. And as a result of the charter, we are. I mean, we certainly, we hire the director. I think that the CETA committee is advisory. And what I want to see is you coming before this board, and from what I understand from Mr. Holmes, that you plan on coming in August, to tell us your assessment of the department, because I thought we were very clear when you were hired that we want to see your assessment of the department as it functions, your assessment of the town as you've spent a great deal of time going around talking to different people, and I know that you've gone to and invited each member of the Board of Selectmen to have a conversation with you. But my problem with that is you're getting separate visions and separate input.
Mrs. Begley, if we
So
could kind of stick to this.
I am sticking to this, Mr. Holmes. So for something like this that's just providing complete autonomy within that office, I'm not very comfortable with that. Just as Mr. Holmes, when he signs the documents, he said he goes in there and has to sign the documents. I'd like to see some of those documents, you know, as a board, not just the chair seeing those documents. But for people to know the certificate of vote that we're discussing, it reads that we would vote to authorize the director of the Wareham Community and Economic Development Authority, Salvatore Pina, to execute and deliver on behalf of the Wareham Community and Economic Development Authority and the town of Wareham agreements, deeds, mortgages, discharges of mortgages, and other instruments incidental to the purchase, sale, and mortgaging of real estate and contract amendments associated with the CDBG Mini Entitlement Block Grant Program, grants, loans, and contracts with subrecipients and subgrantees, and contracts and agreements associated with gifts given to CETA and grants secured by and awarded to CETA. It's just too broad for me. I want to have this board completely engaged in the process, and I want this board to be part of, I know that you're creating a vision, I know you are, but I want you to come before this board and share that vision with the board, and then I'd feel more comfortable with something like this, when all the people in the community have an understanding. I think individual conversations are very, very good, but it doesn't build consensus.
Well, Mrs. Begley, if I could just answer one, I think your key point. There is nothing that I do that's not part of an approved plan. So when we have a grant application, we have already achieved that consensus. So all I'm asking is to execute the plan that's been approved by the board and through the consensus of the town. We have housing rehab projects that need to go. They're happening as we speak. They've been happening for years. Those projects need to be signed off on, and I can assure you the town administrator has not been signing off of those, nor has the chair of the Board of Selectmen been signing off on those. So to your point about looking at the way the office functions, what I'm trying to do is take responsibility for that piece of it and make sure that you have somebody who has knowledge and is willing to take responsibility for the day-to-day activities that go on.
And I understand your point, but I personally feel it's premature.
Thank you.
Premature? I'm not sure I understand that. These are ongoing projects. This is not vision. This is not about his vision for the future. These are projects that we've already committed to. We have contractors in, they're doing work. And this is day-to-day signings that are from the Cedar.
Well, Mr.
office.
Holmes, you're entitled to your opinion, as I'm
Right,
entitled
well,
to mine.
this, as a matter of fact, this has nothing to do with his vision. This has to do with day-to-day operations.
Well, then, Mr. Pina can certainly come before this board and tell us about some of those issues in more detail. That would be wonderful, because then we could have it on TV, and the entire community
So
could be
you're
engaged.
suggesting that every contractor that he deals with, he comes in here and...
That's not what I said, Mr. Holmes. I'm asking, this is the first time that Mr. Pina has been before us since he's been hired,
Oh.
right?
Well, no, not
I don't,
exactly, but.
I don't think that's accurate either. But
Is it my turn, Mr. Chair?
Mrs. Winslow.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have a big problem with this. And the reason why is that Mr. Riley signed a document committing CETA to an audit that was supposed to be paid for from the block grant. He signed off on that letter of engagement. That's what Mr. Sullivan said.
He
And
said, Mrs. Winslow, I think he said Mr. Sanjanet did.
Sanjanet and Mr. Riley.
No, there's only one signature here.
It's only one
Interim
signature
town
on the
manager.
Go
document.
back and watch what he said.
She has the document.
There's one
We-
signature here.
What they say,
Which is
what he
hard
said
to
was
read,
Mr.
very
Riley was the director at the time.
Pardon? Okay.
I think what he said is Mr. Riley was the director at the time.
Oh,
of the-
okay. However, my issue here is that the Board of Selectmen is granted this authority under the law, and quite frankly, I believe that our charter insists that a proposal like this go to town meeting. Every year at our annual town meeting, the town votes to allow the town administrator and the Board of Selectmen to sign contracts. I am completely uncomfortable allowing anybody outside of the Board of Selectmen or the town administrator to sign contracts. I don't believe, and it's not that this isn't an issue of trust or anything like that, it's because we need to protect the assets of the community. And while we may be talking about a community mini block grant that everybody believes the money has been budgeted for, there have been issues in the past with these things. And I do think that, as mundane as it may be, it is important that the chairman of the board, one of his duties when signing off on those things is so that he's aware of what's going on. And that way, if he sees something that he may feel is out of place or is questionable, then he can bring that to the rest of the board. And if we were going to delegate this responsibility, then I would want it delegated to the town administrator, who's already the procurement officer for the community, and that would just make sense to me. That's all.
Anyone else?
Just very quickly, I just want to repeat, the only reason I had any concern is strictly the process of what we have in front of us for paperwork. And I just didn't think that the chain of command allowed us to go all the way down and bypass the town administrator as it's written. Once we get an opinion from legal, hopefully we can move forward on this. I apologize for the extra that's been going on. It's not what we're questioning, at least I'm not.
The selectmen, I'll just comment on that. The chairman of the board of selectmen doesn't sign these documents now, and hasn't.
Who's signing them?
Probably Mr. Sanborn, and the CETA director is signing them, or nobody signing. I'm sure somebody's signing them, but it's not the board of selectmen. I sign documents that deal between the town of Wareham and the state, or the grantor of the grant. I sign those documents. I do not sign a document for someone to cut a tree down that it's already been approved, and I don't sign off on the bill to cut the tree down. I've signed off on the grant between the state and the town. And they carry out, Mr. Pina's office carries out the activities, and they sign off on the individual tasks, not the Board of Selectmen. So that's what's going on today. I don't sign those.
Can we find out who is signing these documents?
I believe it's the CETA director. He would be
I
able
have
to
been
tell you.
signing off on documents because those the past practice has, staff have been signing some documents. So I have taken that responsibility in the interim, and I am trying to bring that attention to this, which is why I initiated this formal process.
Mr. Chairman, past practice is a labor union term. It's not something that we apply to things like signing contracts.
Time out. He's not signing any contracts. The grant, which is awarded to the town, is signed off. The chairman of the Board of Selectmen, whoever the top elected official, whatever they call that line is signed by the chairman of this board.
Can we just please...
When it comes to day-to-day operations, I would be there all day signing things. I don't sign. I've never signed any of that stuff. Just the communication between the state and the town. Period.
So who's signing off on mortgages and contracts and?
Since I have gotten there, I have started signing off on them. But I can tell you that before I got there, staff signed them.
Oh, Mr. Chairman.
Right. He's absolutely right.
I know.
That's
that
my belief.
That doesn't
Mr.
make...
Riley before you, and I forget Mrs. Wally before that. I think Peter signed off on some stuff while he was here, because it's considered day to day.
And it's why I tried to go through a formal process.
I agree with you.
The process, just to, Miss Wally had that certificate of, she was able to sign, and this evidently occurred after she left and went on. I'm not sure. I thought Mr. Riley was signing them, and Mr. Sanborn.
In a vacuum, people will fill it.
Mr. Chairman, can we please get an accurate assessment of what's going on and what these documents are? And can town council please give us an opinion as to who, outside of you, would be the appropriate signer based on the statute?
Are these legally binding contracts if they've been signed by
It's
an
a
unauthorized person?
mortgage, of course.
Mr. Bowen.
Mr. Chairman, I don't want to offer any opinions on this until I've sat down with Mr. Pina. We've sat down with the special act and the charter and figure out where the lines of authority are. Under traditional redevelopment authority powers, and probably what Mr. Pina is more familiar with, 121B, Section 11, if we had that type of redevelopment authority, he wouldn't even be here talking to us tonight.
Right.
Now, we don't quite have that, but there's a certain amount of overlap in there. I think he and I need to sit down on Thursday and just figure out where that overlap, if anywhere, where it is.
I agree.
And I would just like to offer, I mean, I am happy if you'd like the town administrator in the interim to sign any documents, but I want you to rest assured that I've taken that responsibility to protect the town, to make sure that the documents that are getting signed are correct, and that you have a person who has a level of authority to sign them.
Agreed. Does that satisfy the board? And Mr. Bowen will meet and get back to us. Good? Yes? Gentlemen? Okay. All right, thank you very much. Do
Thank
you have
you.
anything else on here?
No, thank you very much. I appreciate your time and attention.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair, we're up to State House serial loan notes. I'm going to make an assumption that this would be Mr. Foster.
Yes, it is. And
Welcome, Mr. Foster.
Excuse me?
Welcome.
Thank you. The town received 4 bids on $1.25 million worth of State House notes. The lowest bid was 2% net interest cost, but before you can award the bid to the lowest bidder, Century Bank, there is a vote that needs to be taken to establish the maximum useful life on 3 pieces of equipment, and that's what you should have in your packet. Johnson Vac sweeper, a catch basin truck, and a backhoe. And if you set the maximum useful life at 7 years, I can issue these 5-year State House notes, and we can go on to the next phase after you take this vote.
Okay. Do I need to read the entire document into the record?
You should.
Okay. Mr. Chair, I move, I, the Clerk of the Board of Selectmen of the Town of Wareham, Massachusetts, certify that at a meeting of the Board held July 10th, 2012, of which meeting all members of the Board were duly notified and at which a quorum was present, the following vote was unanimously passed, all of which appears upon the official record of the Board in my custody. Voted, that the maximum useful life of the departmental equipment listed below to be financed with the proceeds of the $500,000 borrowing authorized by the vote of the town passed October 25th, 2010, Article 7, is hereby determined pursuant to General Law, Chapter 44, subsection 7-9, to be as follows. Purpose: Johnson Vac Sweeper, borrowing amount $180,000, maximum useful life 7 years. Catch Basin Truck, $200,000, maximum useful life 7 years. Backhoe 4x4 extended with attachments, $120,000, maximum useful life 7 years. I further certify that the votes were taken at a meeting open to the public, that no vote was taken by secret ballot, that a notice stating the place, date, time, and agenda for the meeting, which agenda included the adoption of the above votes, was filed with the town clerk, and a copy thereof posted in a manner conspicuously visible to the public at all hours in or on the municipal building that the office of the town clerk is located at least 48 hours, not including Saturdays, Sundays, and legal holidays, prior to the time of the meeting and remained so posted at the time of the meeting, that no deliberations or decision in connection with the subject matter of this vote were taken in executive session, all in accordance with General Law, Chapter 30A, subsections 18 through 25, as amended.
Motion made by Mrs. Winslow, second by Mrs. Begley. Anything further on the question? All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Abstain? 500.
Mr. Chair, next up we have sale of grave lots at Center Cemetery. Is there anybody here to?
The
No?
We got a letter from Mr. Gifford. The chairman of the cemetery commissioners had resigned from the committee. There's only one member left on that committee. Due to the fact that there is now just one remaining committee member, I'm forwarding these deeds for your review and to ask the Board of Selectmen to approve and sign them. For your information, each deed has 3 copies, and after being signed and recorded, one is returned to the lot owner, one is kept on file with the town clerk, and the last copy remains on file with the municipal maintenance office. As more deeds and requests pertaining to town cemeteries arise, I will forward them to your office for review and seek approval from the Board of Selectmen, or until such time, obviously, as we have a quorum of that board.
Okay.
Can act. It was in your packet.
Okay, yeah, no, I found it. Okay. So I'm going to move that the board approve Center Cemetery. How much information do I have to give off this?
Not a lot, just the section.
Okay. Center Cemetery, baby section, baby grave number 279.
And maybe the amount.
For $200. Ellen gave a mournful second. It's awful.
And there is actually a number at the top left-hand.
Oh, numbered 2012/5.
I have a motion made. Second by Mrs. Begley. Question, all in favor?
Aye.
All opposed, abstain, 500.
Mr. Chair, I'm going to move that the board approve. Is today the 10th or the 11th? I'm going to move that the board approve cemetery lot number 2012-4, Center Cemetery Annex Section, Lot 302, Graves 3 and 4, which is 1/4 lot for the sum of $1,601.
Motion made.
Did anybody second?
Have a motion made. Second by Mr. Titlebaum. Question, all in favor?
Aye.
All opposed, 500.
Mr. Chair, I'm going to move that we approve cemetery number 2012-6 in the annex section, which is lot 245, grave number 7, for the amount of $601.
Motion made and seconded by Mr. Titlebaum. Anything else on the question? All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Abstained? 500.
Okay. Next up, we have.
Yeah, no, she has.
Yeah,
the,
I have
she
the
has
whole
the,
folder. You're gonna.
The
Yeah.
original.
The discussion and appointment of a trash committee. Mr. Chair, this is your item.
Yes, you know, we've heard a lot of discussion. We had a presentation done some time ago, and most of the discussion really is centered around onset. And I've been informed that, you know, attached to onset is a town called Wareham, for better or for worse, right? And so we have to deal with that. But in my mind, I've really, I got to tell you, I won't go on my soapbox about this, but I got to tell you that, you know, it just takes me back. I wish Mr. Pino was still here. It takes me back to a meeting we had with A.D. Makepeace not too long ago, and Mr. Hogan gave a presentation, and he's absolutely right on the money. And I talked a little bit about this last month, about the circle of business and the fact that most of our circle is water. And we really need, if we're going to attract economic development here, we really need to class it up. Because otherwise it's not going to happen in Wareham. That's a fact. And trash, I call it, I almost got slapped by Dolores again. I said it so many times the other day driving in the car. Podunk signs, that's what I call it. It's embarrassing how a business owner can have a plywood sign with paint on it, expect somebody to stop. I mean, it doesn't make any sense to me, right? If you want to attract business into your shop, have something presentable. Not only that, but these podunk signs are on town property. I went round and round in town hall the other day about this. I did not get a satisfactory answer at all. So I have that coming up on the next agenda to talk about signs. But this trash thing, it's not just the beach. It's not just Onset Beach. It's trash. You know, I've talked to Mr. Gifford quite a bit, and I feel some of his pain. He doesn't have too many hands to pick up trash, whether it's on the beach or not. So I really would like to see us, I don't want to form another committee that goes on infinitum and does nothing. So I don't know if committee is the best word for this. But I did speak with him. He's out of town. And he is in favor of having a group of people get together. Maybe we call it the TTF, the Trash Task Force, and include, you know, it doesn't have to be that stringent, but I know Mr. Titlebaum has talked here in the past about involving some of the Park and Recreation group in putting together, you know, some citizens who are concerned about trash. Mr. Willis and some of his group, he came in with a petition for 350 or 400 people signed it. You know, the harbor master certainly covers the beaches. The chief, maybe some representation from his department, although, you know, I'm really looking at him more for enforcement of some other things. But, putting up a litter sign. How many people do you actually give a ticket to? I don't know. So, in my mind, I'd like to see a group formed, a task force, if you will, to look at trash and try to come up with some ideas that will help Mr. Gifford in his mission. It's not just Mark's mission. I mean, it's all of our mission to try to clean the place up because, quite honestly, it's a mess.
Mr. Chair,
That's the bottom line.
I agree with some of what you've said, but I do want to acknowledge municipal maintenance for Monday morning.
Oh, hey, listen.
I just do. It's
I
so
hear ya.
important.
I
It's
hear ya.
important to me that the few people that are working so hard with
Right, nobody-
fewer hands that must feel really criticized. And when I went by at 6:45, it was pretty clear that the rubbish had been placed by those trash barrels. And there were men out there with those sticks with the nails on the end,
Yeah.
and they worked really hard. And 3 hours later, I went by and the place was immaculate. And I've seen that after most of the festivals that we have. The next day, the place is immaculate. It
Right.
may not be the second someone opens their eyes at dawn, but within a very short period of time, I think it's important that we acknowledge their hard work.
Absolutely. And I'll tell you that on Sunday morning, I thought it was my alarm at 6:45. It was Mr. Gifford at 6:45. Yes. So, Mark, I'll pay you back for that. I think I had called him the previous day at 7, so it wasn't too bad. But no, it's like 6:45, and he was already out on location, and his guys were out there. This, and I will make sure that's on the record, this has absolutely nothing to do, well, it does have a lot to do with municipal maintenance, because we're trying to get help. We're trying to get some bodies or anything to help them out. They do a great job. Listen, I drive through Onset every day, as you know, many times. And quite frankly, since the additional barrels were put out, right across from Mrs. Bessie's, at that crosswalk, prior to the new barrels, there was always a pile of garbage on the ground there. Not always, but, when it fills up. But now they got the additional barrels, and I haven't seen any trash on that ground at all, right there at the crosswalk. So, I've noticed a big difference. And what we're really trying to do, I think it's more than just the beaches and Onset. The place needs to be cleaned up. So, kudos to the maintenance. Hopefully, we can get them some more help. That would be a big issue.
But I'd love to be able to put up cameras where people frequently put out their couches and their tires and their TVs, or they throw them in the woods. So
Or the fact that if you come to town, you can't always get a dump sticker to go to the dump. Another issue.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
may I comment?
Sure.
Thank you.
That's what we're looking for.
I absolutely agree with putting together a trash committee to come up with some ideas. I do think that it should include a representative from municipal maintenance, because the bulk of this falls on their shoulders, and I think it's important that they be involved. I think that what I notice in the community is that the beaches that are closest to food places tend to suffer the most with the trash. There's just not enough room in the trash barrels for the waste product of local food joints, and pizza boxes, styrofoam containers that contain food, things of that nature. If you go to the beaches that are somewhat more remote, and we go to Little Harbor a lot, that beach does not have trash on it. However, I will say that we went out of town last week to a beach down the Cape that was absolutely disgusting and full of trash. So it's not a problem and there were no, by the way, food joints in the area. It's not a problem that's unique to Wareham. And I think that I'd like this board to not only really consider who we're going to place on this committee, but what we're going to task them with and give them a timeline. because I think the educational piece, especially for people coming into our community, is huge. You know, that we won't tolerate. And, you know, do we really want to write tickets to tourists and irritate them so that they won't come back? No. But there's got to be a better way to educate them about how we feel about our community and our beaches that we invited them to. I heard Mr. Willis's reference to Walt Disney World, and at Walt Disney World there is a management theory that everybody picks up trash. Whether you're the janitor or whether you're the CEO, you walk through that park with a stick and you pick up trash and throw it away. And that's why it's so clean. Obviously, we don't have our CEO walking the beaches every day, and you know, we don't necessarily have employees on the beaches, but I think we can work within that theory and spread the message in a positive way and try to encourage people and maybe, you know, find other receptacles to deal with the larger items that end up just thrown by the wayside. Thank you.
We've focused a lot of the discussion on what's generated in the summer in terms of trash and pile up around beaches, and discussions of what happens at Little Harbor, which I agree, you don't see a lot of trash there because there isn't a lot of food being consumed there. But we've got a larger trash problem in this town, which is, you know, manifested by the fact that we've had to form litter mobs, that we have to have volunteer citizens run around and pick up trash on our roads. And this is, frankly, it's a consequence of not having a municipal trash collection, part of it. I know in the Minot Forest, we had dumping issues, had to put up a guardrail in one spot where people just dumped household trash. I think we got an email recently from a Summer resident asking about whether they could be issued a temporary permit to use the transfer station or something like that when they rented a cottage for a certain period of time. I think we probably need a bylaw that states that a landlord is responsible to remove trash. I think this has to be a multifaceted approach. We can't just look at onset and say, you know, 6 o'clock in the morning, there's a bunch of trash piled up, and that's the only issue we confront here. It's a town-wide problem, and we need town-wide solutions. I think it's going to have to be done in the realm of new bylaws dealing with trash. I think it's going to have to be dealt with in terms of how we manage municipal maintenance as assets to get the trash on the routine pickups. I think the harbor, as you say, the harbor master needs to be involved. It's got to be a multifaceted approach. So those are my thoughts.
Right, because I'm not just talking about the beach. We have a bigger problem than just the beach. Mr. Slavin?
I'll make this very quick. We're running late. The only way this is going to work, the town has to make a full commitment. Something as simple as simple words as zero tolerance for litter. It has to be a campaign, and every department has to be involved. Town employees, the people who live in town, etc. We have to provide the places in order to make this work. And again, I'm just going to repeat, it has to be a town-wide project. It's the only way it's going to work, right? Even with the schools. Thank you.
Yeah. Anything else?
Mr. Chair, are we going to discuss the makeup of this committee and open up for applications from citizens at large, or what's?
I think what I'd like to get, at least this evening, from the board is a commitment to form the trash task force, and then Mr. Gifford will be back, and I'd like him in as part of that discussion, certainly himself, and without getting into day-to-day affairs, I'm thinking probably 4 at-large folks.
Okay.
You know, when it creates such a large committee that, so I'm thinking, you know, Mr. Gifford, and probably in terms of the beaches, he would talk with the harbor master and bring him in from time to time, and maybe there are some other department heads, Mr. Burke certainly, Mr. Ethier, in terms of health, trash, may be involved from time to time, and you know, for citizens, and then when we get Mr. Gifford together here, so that we can have a more detailed discussion, we'll put a timeline on it.
I think having Mr. Ethier on it is a great idea, because when we did a beach cleanup, he had a container that was safe for, unfortunately, hypodermic syringes. But, you know, he kind of also supplied gloves to some of the people, so it might not be a bad idea.
Yeah. And he also deals specifically with some areas of trash where it's found, right? When he does his inspections and things. So I think he would be a great benefit. I don't know that he would need to be at every meeting, and then of course, you know, I would suggest a member of the board. Obviously, it's a task force, so it's not a committee that's going to last forever. It's something that we want to try to get in place to try to get some answers moving in the right direction. So that's what I'm looking for. It's just some consensus that it's good thing to go. And then if Mr. Gifford was here, we could talk about the ingredients. I'll ask him to come in and discuss the ingredients. I mean, I don't know that I need him for that, but if the board wants to wait, that's fine. If not, I'm ready to accept the motion and create the task force.
I'm happy to wait for Mr. Gifford and get his thoughts and before we go and do something.
Want to wait?
Yeah.
Yep. Okay, we'll have that on the next agenda. Next up.
Mr. Chair, next
Thank
we
you.
we have the approval of the bonds for the town clerk's office. Not quite sure. Yeah, but the note inside says that Roxanne will sign on Monday.
They're all
So,
sealed and everything.
yeah. So I don't know exactly what we're, well, Mr. Chairman, it looks like you have to sign them. I believe we have to vote.
Yeah.
I think we have to vote on the amounts. Is that correct, Mr. Foster?
The amounts, there are established amounts for the treasurer collector. I'm not sure what the town clerk has for
Okay.
amounts.
Well, hopefully I do this correctly. I'm going to move to approve the surety bond in the amount of $10,000 for Department Assistant 2 of the town of Wareham, bond number 613-89707.
Motion made. Second by Mr. Titlebaum. Question? All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Abstained? 500.
I'm going to move to approve the surety bond in the amount of $10,000 for the assistant town clerk for the town of Wareham, bond number 613-89701.
A motion made by Mrs. Winslow, second by Mr. Titlebaum. Question? All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Abstained? 500.
That's for Steve to sign.
Right, but you have to read it? This is to certify now?
No. Mr. Chairman, next up on the agenda, we have the any other town business not reasonably anticipated. So I do have a couple bills that we need to address. The first being, we have an invoice from Huggins and Witten LLC, which is dated September 13th, 2011. The invoice number is Wareham BOS. The total amount due is $3,112.50. I'm going to move to approve and pay said invoice. Ellen seconded. Mrs. Begley seconded.
Motion made by Mrs. Winslow and seconded by Mrs. Begley. Pay invoice number Wareham BOS. Sorry. On the question.
One simple question to the town administrator. The bill is for the fiscal year that ended, and this is a new fiscal year. Is there an issue with that? The bill is invoiced with 2011.
What was the date in 2011?
9/13.
9/13.
That's 2012.
Fiscal year.
2012.
Are we okay? Because we're past the close of the fiscal year.
Yeah, that's...
Sorry.
Yeah, but you're still accepting invoices
Right.
from
Yeah,
the prior.
I would say that's acceptable.
Yeah, because even though we're past the date of July 1st, there's usually a.
You said within the first 15 days.
First
I
15
just
days.
discussed that with town council.
That's good. That's my only question.
Anything else? All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Abstain? 500.
Mr. Chairman, I move to approve the invoice from Emerson and Emerson dated June 1st, 2012, bill number 616, in the amount of $1,620. This is for our Labor Council. Mrs. Begley seconded.
Motion made and seconded. Question? All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Abstain? 500.
Mr. Chair, I move to approve the invoice from Emerson and Emerson dated June 29th, 2012, bill number 630, in the amount of $2,745.
Motion made and seconded. Question? All in favor? Aye. All opposed? Abstain? 500.
Mr. Chair, if nobody has any other unanticipated business, we have a new item on the agenda called old/unfinished business.
Right.
Okay. How are we going to make that one work without getting into...
Is there anything outstanding? I think there's one thing. I think I had one.
We're waiting on...
It's no secrets.
Yeah, we're waiting on the committees that were formed by the Board of Selectmen.
Yes, I got the
information.
Letter, almost finished, and it'll be going out before the end of the week.
Also, in conjunction with the complaint that we had about the sewer commissioners, we have the other issue, which we should be, it's our responsibility also, which is the special act that was passed on the dollars for the meals tax being assigned to capital. We're responsible for following that up as well. That's gone by time-wise. It's really critical simply because our budget for 2013 includes that money in the regular town-side budget, and if it does pass, that money will come out of the budget, and we'll have a problem.
I think I'll put that sewer committee under there, sewer commissioners under this as well.
Yes. You can do both if you want.
Yeah. Anything else?
I have a question about something. We continue to, I don't know the answer, we continue to entertain permits or requests from people in town that want to close roads for block parties, et cetera, et cetera. Is that our purview, or is it the road commissioners?
I saw that question the other day. I don't know that, I think it was questioned.
Thought I'd ask Mr. Bowen.
It was kind of a gray area, I think, at the time. That's what I saw.
With your permission, Mr. Chairman, I'm more inclined to say it's with the Board of Selectmen than with the road commissioners, because it's not setting speed limits, for example, like we had earlier. It's more event-oriented and use of town property-oriented. So, you know, I'll admit it is gray, but I'm inclined to think it lies more with you than with the commissioners.
Which is fine.
Yeah.
But I guess my other question is, there's been, people generally come to the board with everything. So it may have to be directed to, for example, planning or zoning or road commissioners for part of this and part of that, or the fact that we have separate water districts. Do we have, is that kind of what the staff does, Mr. Foster? If they come into the office, they call the office, they kind of redirect them to the perhaps several different areas that they need to go?
A lot of the questions never get to you, the board.
sure.
Great. The office deals with this, and they delegate or they send them off to the various department heads. Right now, the road commissioners, I believe, are where all these questions should be headed. I mean, you get them as the Board of Selectmen, but they're also being sent off. If they come to the office, they're being sent to John Charbonneau, who's the chairman of the road commissioners.
Do they have a set meeting schedule? Do you know? Does
Not that I
anybody
know of, no.
So they're just meeting as needed as opposed to quarterly or every other month or monthly or whatever?
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman.
To answer your original question, as things, I had this issue with Mr. Andrews, and I asked him to put on his report ongoing issues status, right? So if we move something off to next week, to me it's not done. Old unfinished business, and I'm going to create the list so that each week it'll be on there. It's going to stay on there till it's done, so that nothing will fall through the cracks. That's my intention.
No, I think it's a good idea. I just think that we need to have that
and
list.
if there's something I missed, just shoot me an email and I'll add it to the list until it's done.
I just want to make sure we have the list, so we're duly notifying.
That's certainly fine.
Town Administrator report. Anything to report, Mr. Foster?
I was actually going to say that I had nothing this evening, except Mr. Slavin just brought up a good point. We all received a memo from Derek Sullivan regarding the 2012 meals and hotel and motel excise revenues, and I'll just read it quickly. Please be advised that the town has received the final fiscal 2012 disbursements for meals and hotel motel excise tax revenues. The meals tax program proved to be a strong revenue generator for the town, earning 5.25 more than the 10-month adjusted DOR estimate of $321,822. The total collection was $338,732. The hotel-motel tax did not yield the anticipated revenue, although the first quarter disbursement was approximately 110% of the anticipated collection. The following 3 quarters were below the estimates. The total collection, less community events, 70%, was $15,769, or $4,953 below the revenue estimate. The total surplus between the two items was $11,957, but when we're referring to new capital projects, that's the reason why I'm reading this. This was actually not meant to be in the administrator's report, but we all received a copy of it. Are we talking about additional capital expenses versus we just entered into a 5-year bond, and the first payment being in 2014? Is $319,000 with interest. When I just read you these numbers, that pretty much takes up all of that as a new capital item. So is this over and above that amount of money?
Mr.
I can answer if you want. The way the special act was put in, it was that 0.75%, which was originally passed and went into the general fund. That portion would be assigned to capital items, and it would only be in effect once it's passed by the legislature. So for 2012 fiscal year, whatever we got stays in the town side. It doesn't go into capital. It doesn't get assigned out. So it's still going to the town side budget as of today.
Okay, that hasn't gone through the state yet.
Has not gone through the 2 legislatures yet.
But for new capital purchases, is this 5-year capital improvement project part of the allocated 75%? Or are we looking at new capital?
It normally would be new. It's for the new projects. I'm not sure you can use that money for prior ones.
Well, that would have a major impact on the budgeting for future years. But that was brought up in the last segment, so I figured I would mention the numbers.
Again, the way the act was written, it was for doing capital projects.
Yeah, I guess the overall question is, where is the act at?
That's what the question was that I asked just earlier. We don't know where it's at.
Could we also assign Mr. Slavin to expedite that answer on the?
Thank you.
Since he spoke about it.
No objection here.
Thank you, Alan.
Mr.
Chairman. There was. I recall making the motion at town meeting. I want to say that motion included 2012.
It could have if it got passed by the legislature. This is a thing that's pending strictly on the date of when it's passed. So as far as fiscal year 2012 is passed now, so you can't go back.
Putting it on the unfinished list for you to tell us about next.
Oh, thank you again.
Mr. Chairman, I have an item for the unfinished list, too.
Okay.
There's been a lot of conversation about the installation of parking meters and other ways to generate revenue. And one of the issues that continues to come up is the percentage split between the town and the Community Events Committee, because the way the estimates have been is that large sums of money could be collected. Prior to Mr. Andrews leaving, he had indicated to me that he had had a conversation with Community Events about how we may go about in the future. I think.
Okay, but it's not something that's been discussed here, so I'll put it on the agenda, right?
Yeah. So
But I think that actually needs to be a new agenda item. It's
Okay.
not unfinished business.
Well, because the conversation's gone on for a long time, it kind of
Yeah,
feels
yeah,
unfinished. Whatever you want to do.
Right, we'll get it
but
on,
if we can get the Community Events Committee to come speak with us, because we need to figure out how we're going to accomplish the goal of all this, and that's a piece of it that needs to be resolved.
Right. Got it.
Thank you. I have a copy of the special act.
We'll need that special act because that is all stated. That's again is a special act which is in place.
So when it shows up on the agenda, the office could perhaps email as part of our packet a copy of the special act to all the board members.
I would say we should have that.
I have a copy.
Okay.
But
You need another copy?
no, I don't need another copy. I'm just saying it's part of the packet, so nobody comes that night and says.
Never seen it.
We don't know.
Well,
Right.
I'll get it at least a week before.
Right.
All right.
Liaison reports. Does anybody have a Mr. Teitelbaum? Mr. Slavin? Oh, that looks like a long report. Are you reading that whole thing?
Of course not, unless you'd like to do that.
No.
This is real simple. Site plan review approval was done for the Hawthorne Kennedy, excuse me, I'm getting tired tonight, Hawthorne Kidney Center dialysis unit, Cranberry Plaza. It passed site plan review yesterday at their meeting, and they will be going ahead and putting the dialysis center in. Entrance will be in the backside, actually, of the plaza, so it'll look a little strange. The doctor's office is in the front, and this is all set to go.
Is that through Hawthorne Medical?
No, they're using the Hawthorne name, but it's part of a group that's based out of the North Shore. They've got, I think, 12 or 13 units in Mass right now. I think there's going to be 13 or 14 beds, for dialysis. People, unfortunately, in this type of system go there 3 times a week for 2 or 3 hours at a time. But it's the only one in the area now for us. That's all I have.
Mrs. Begley? Mrs. Winslow?
Just real quick, the Capital Planning Committee is meeting on Friday morning at 9 a.m. because they're having trouble getting a quorum. Well, we're not sure where they're going to end up. And I talked to Mr. Holmes about this in terms of where we're going to end up having a meeting that people can come. And they do have some vacancies, which is also causing part of the issue. So for those of you who have been following this saga and trying to go, this week, Friday, 9 a.m. is what they're going to try.
And just to clarify,
What are you doing?
I'm
What are you two
liaison.
doing?
I'm liaison to that committee, and Mrs. Winslow is, we had traded, and we had told you that, Mr. Holmes, the night of the decision, and Mrs. Winslow is affirmative action, and capital planning.
We had traded because they were scheduled on a day that I typically
But we traded.
work.
Right. I'm sure the two of you working together.
We'll
will
work it out. Absolutely, we'll work it out.
I don't know if you have a liaison report, Mr. Chairman.
No, I guess
There's no policies listed under our select.
I don't see anybody with a thick, and it's 10 minutes to 10.
Yeah.
So, it's kind of disappointing.
Did anybody bring the liquor policies?
I
with them?
did. As a
I
matter
have
of fact,
mine too.
I have this big stack right here.
Well, I have the one that, the draft that we received from Mr. Bowen. Do you have that with you?
I do, 18 pages.
Yes, I have a question, and I have an extra copy of, do you need one,
You guys have
Rich?
a copy?
Does everybody have a copy? Do you need my extra copy?
I have it on my iPhone.
I have a question about, I know we're not going to approve it, but it's just to discuss it. On page 2, under posting and signs, item B,
Hang on 1 second, please. All right.
would that include conditions imposed by the licensing authority? Mr. Bowen?
License, this is a posting.
This is all other
This is
posting and
we're
signs.
talking about,
Yeah.
License issued by the authority shall be posted in
Uh, Conspicuous place, easily seen by the public, where they can be read without difficulty and without the assistance of employee. So,
All other licenses,
permits and certificates affecting the licensed premise shall be posted conspicuously, et cetera, et cetera. Would this include conditions imposed by the licensing authority?
With your permission, Mr. Chairman, that's the answer. All conditions that you vote to impose should be on the face of the license.
Okay. Okay. So they shall be. So all conditions imposed on the license shall be on the face of the license. Okay. Then on page 5, under hours of operation.
Yep.
Now, you have the hours of operation shall be restricted to those set by the licensing authority and stated on the face of the license. No patron shall be on the premises before the official opening time nor 15 minutes after the official closing hours. Customers must be up and on the way out since the closing hour of the licensed premises has been reached, and no drink consumption time. So, what about those businesses, and we frequently have requests because of, say, pool tournaments, or, whatever, cat herding. Is there a provision here in the hours of operation for extending days or hours? Or did you put it somewhere else? I looked for it. I couldn't find it.
With your permission, Mr. Chairman, the problem with having
Yes.
written this so long ago, I don't remember everything that's in it anymore. But your question was, is there anything in here that talks about expanding the hours? And the answer
And
would,
the process.
yeah, and the answer would be no, because the process for expanding hours is set out in Chapter 138. So, for example, let's suppose the Board of Selectmen issued me a liquor license and allowed me to be open from 11 a.m. to 11 p.m. And I want to open until 1 a.m. or 2 a.m. What Chapter 138 says is that I would have to apply to the Board of Selectmen for modification of the liquor license, the modification being the change of hours. The statute says that I believe it's under Section 23 of Chapter 138, that I would have to make such application, that notice would have to be given to abutters, there would have to be a full hearing, and the Board of Selectmen would have to approve the change of hours. So that's not in the regulation, you're correct, but it is covered by Mass General Law.
So, through you, Mr. Chair, to Attorney Bowen, what about the way things go now, where we receive an email the day of or the day before notifying the licensing authority of being open days that aren't on the license, or earlier in the day or later in the day?
You have with your permission, Mr. Chairman, you have a totally unique license policy, the likes of which I've not had the pleasure of encountering anywhere. Right now, your policy allows for variations in opening and closing hours simply by sending a note to the Board of Selectmen. So I think it's a policy decision for the board to decide whether it wants to carry on with that policy or come up with something different.
But are you saying it's Mass General Law 138? Is that what you're saying?
To expand your, if you gave me a liquor license for a particular set of hours, yes, if I want more hours, if I want a 2 o'clock opening, I have to come before the board and ask for a 2 o'clock opening.
And for the board would vote, and there would be notice to abutters.
Right.
Now, I thought that our policies could be stricter than Mass General Law, not less strict.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Great. Okay, so moving on page 8.
So, well, not moving along. That's an important point. Our policy says that if I have a liquor license from 12 to 3 a.m. and I want to open at 10, Board of Selectmen policy says all I got to do is send a note.
Right.
And
State
what
law
you're
says.
saying is, it's a note, and then there's a definition of a temporary period, 2 weeks. So what you're saying is, if I want to open at 11 instead of 12, the more stricter law is the state law, and somebody would have to come in here every time they have a change of their schedule or an event.
No, well, Mr. Chairman, I don't want to go that far with it. I mean, I would want to look at a particular case before I rendered that kind of opinion. You know, for example, state law says that license holders, go back to me, you give me a liquor license, and we'll just say it's a pouring license, restaurant. State law says that I have the right to be open from 11 a.m. to 11 p.m. So there may be circumstances, there may not be, there may be circumstances where the Board of Selectmen has said, well, you can have a liquor license Monday through Saturday from 11 till pick some hour. A condition like that is on its face illegal, because if you grant a liquor license to somebody, a pouring license, as of right, they are able to be open for all those days between 11 and 11. So, you know, I don't want to offer sweeping generalizations about particular cases. Everything's going to be fact-specific. What I will say is you have a very unusual licensing policy. You might want to consider tightening it up. You might want to review some of your liquor licenses to make sure that the conditions that are on them comply with state law. You may have cases where you've limited the number of days a week that that license holders can be open, and such conditions are not legal.
Well, Mr. Chair, through you, I'm saying there are many liquor licenses that come before this board that we didn't choose the days and the hours. The liquor license holder did. So if they choose to be open 4 days a week for, say, just lunch, say they just want to be open for the lunchtime hour, are you saying then if they're only open 1 day a week for lunch, then if they want to be open 3 days a week for lunch, then they don't have to come before the board or notify anyone? Are you saying that because of Mass General Law 138? And they chose the original hours.
What I'm saying is that under state law, they would be allowed to be open 7 days a week between 11 a.m. and 11 p.m., regardless of what they told you when they came in. And what your policy says is that if they wish to open up on those other days, they can simply drop you a note saying, we're going to be open on such and such days. Now, is this a good result? That's a policy question, not a legal question.
Now, do we have something in place that if someone does say want to expand their hours or their days, that the police department is notified as well? So the notification doesn't go just to the Board of Selectmen, that it goes to the police department?
Right.
That's not a question for you, Rich.
When we get a notice, you know, we got this X going on, we're going to open at 11, comes into the selectman's office. Sometimes they're copied to the chief and sometimes they're not. And Shirley forwards those to the police department.
Okay.
I did verify that this week to make sure that she was doing that. So, and they are doing that.
Okay, so that last thing is clear as mud, Rich. So on page 8, section L, any licensee intending to close its place of business shall seek permission of the authority in writing before such closing, stating the reason for such closing, and by providing documentation in support of such request. So we don't have anything like that in our policy right now.
No.
And my other question is, there have been...
Well, hang on a second.
Uh-huh.
Does that question... Is your question about permanent closing or temporary closing, daily closing?
I
When you
don't
say
know. It's kind
closing,
of, for him, this is not my policy. This is Attorney Bowen's policy. So I don't know if this is for renovation, if this is, as I was moving on, I don't know if this means renovation or if someone actually is closing their business. I mean, does that need to be clarified, or you don't think so?
The section that, with your permission, Mr. Chairman, the section that you're quoting from says that they must state the reason for such closing and provide documentation in support of the request. So it could be we're renovating, it could be it's the dead of winter and it's snowy out and there aren't 10 people who'd come patronize me in 7 days worth of business. It could be I want to go to Florida for a couple of months. It could be any combination of those things. And at that point, because the license holder has to seek permission from you to close.
That would be a vote.
Yeah, it's up to you to decide whether it's a worthy reason. And I have to say that this is generally the way it's done. It's not the way you do it.
Oh.
Yeah.
I move that we go beyond the hour 10 for not
Yeah, it shouldn't
maximum time of 10:10.
Yeah, let's just wrap this up. Sure. Oh, wait a minute. Yeah. Second.
That was my motion. Yeah, sure, he says.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Abstain?
Okay.
Mr. Chair,
So-
can we
so-
clarify that closing issue?
So the answer then is because this draft says seek permission.
Does that require a vote of the Board of Selectmen, is my
Yes.
question. So the answer is yes. Now,
Can I just ask a
Wait.
follow-up question to that?
Sure.
What
Well,
happens if we're
hang on
having...
one second. Hang on one second. So, I'm not sure about that. I think because then the question becomes define close.
but that's what I'm asked, that's my Part B question.
Yeah, if it's
So my
11
Part
p.m.
A
If it's 11 p.m. I haven't had a customer since 9 o'clock, and it's the middle of winter, and I'm going to close. Obviously, I can't get a vote of the Board of Selectmen.
No, this is under business arrangements of licensees.
That's correct.
So this
You're
isn't...
talking about page 8, 8L,
Yes. So
Right.
I'm not... Right, and I understand where you're coming from.
right?
I understand where you're coming from, right. I mean, if they could just call the police department saying, look, there's a blizzard, I'm closing at 7:30, I know, I usually am open to 11, which is also be good that if people lost power, that they know there's not someone in there. If someone is in there, it could be the owner with the flashlight, not a burglar, so they're not going to have, gun
We
pointed
do
at
have
their
Act
heads.
of God in here, but I was trying, so I understand the part about the seeking permission. And then
But
the
that's why
question
I think there
becomes-
needs clarification of that. My other question is this. If a place closes on a permanent basis, A new occurrence that I've kind of noticed, and I'm sure everybody else has, is they hang on to that liquor license. Kind of what's up with that? And how would that be addressed in this, this policy?
With your permission, Mr. Chairman.
Absolutely.
It doesn't need to be addressed in the policy. It's covered by Chapter 138. It's called cessation of business, and it can be addressed in one of two ways. It can be addressed at the time of annual renewal under Chapter 138, Section 77, or it could be addressed during the course of the year as a disciplinary proceeding under Chapter 138, Section 23, and perhaps Section 12 if it's a restaurant, or Section 15 if it's a package store license. Ultimately, the question of whether a place continues to have what's known as a pocket license comes down to you rather than anyone else. And as I like to say, it's a question for the board. There is nothing wrong with letting someone keep a pocket license if you, as a board, feel there's nothing wrong with it. On the other hand, if there is a clamor for liquor licenses, suppose that you're at your quota and there's nothing available and somebody wants a license and you feel that the public need isn't being served by someone having a pocket license, you can hold a disciplinary hearing and revoke the license for non-use. Now, there are a lot of steps that go into that, so I don't want to oversimplify how that would come about. But it's up to the board to decide whether it wants a pocket license or a revoked license or a non-renewed license at the end of the year or a canceled license.
So you've not addressed it in this particular liquor policy, liquor regulations
No,
because of Chapter 138?
I generally, my philosophy for what it's worth is, to the extent possible, I try not to duplicate laws that are already on the books, because when you try to reinvent laws that are already on the books, you introduce complications and sometimes confusion and sometimes illegality. I like to let the law speak for itself.
So are you saying by law everybody could be issued a liquor license that would be 7 days a week, 11 to 11?
Sure.
And if people, what's the purpose of people choosing their days and hours?
The purpose is twofold. Number one, it's to allow businesses to be open in a fashion that makes the most sense to the business person who operates the business. And number two, by requesting a particular set of hours, it's introducing to the board the amount of liquor availability that will be there. Because, your job is to be the arbiter of what the public good and public need in the town is. And if you approve some proposed limited set of hours, then you're saying, yeah, okay, that satisfies the public need, that's fine.
And if they expand it, it's just at their discretion.
That's what your policy says.
But that's not what the law says.
Well, the law says many things. It says that they can be open as of right from 11 a.m. to 11 p.m., notwithstanding the fact that you may have approved, I don't mean you personally, that the board may have approved licenses that allow openings for less than that. So the bottom line is you really ought to be looking at your policies.
Which is what we're trying to do.
I know.
But please accept Mr. Bowen's document as a draft.
Oh, absolutely.
And which is why we're trying to go through this so that we can adopt a set of policies for the town.
Yeah, one size does not fit all.
Right. And in a community like ours, we need to have some flexibility. I agree with that. Anything else for tonight? We will continue this discussion on the liquor in 2 weeks.
Can we get some of those? I sent you that spreadsheet with all the selectmen policies.
Yeah.
Can we at least review the spreadsheet that I created amongst us as a board to decide what to go?
Those are just going to start coming through in order. We're working on that right now.
Okay. Motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn. Second by Mr. Titlebaum. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed?
Perfect.
Thank you very much.
10:08.
Sorry. 8 minutes.